This happened when I was around 12 years old. It was the middle of the night at my house. My dad worked the graveyard shift at his work. Since it was the weekend, I stayed up most of the night. It was somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m., and my dad told me to lock the doors and go to sleep, which I did. I went into my room and finally went to sleep, but only for about an hour. Around 2 a.m. I woke up to the sound of knocking on my back door. It scared me awake. After a few moments to process what I heard, I decided it was probably just my dad knocking on the door. Maybe he forgot something. Me being really exhausted, I knew he had a house key on him, so I just told myself he'll unlock the door himself. The knocking continued. It was pretty creepy. Then the next thing I knew, the knocking stopped. Then it started again, but at a different location. Someone was knocking on the window in my kitchen. I continued to assure myself that it was just my dad, but I didn't understand why he couldn't unlock the door himself. He always had a key on him. I felt pretty freaked out, and I definitely was not answering the door. If anything, my dad would have called me to open the door for him, and my phone was next to me. The knocking started again at another window. I was terrified now, too scared to get up and check who was out there. The knocking wasn't stopping, and the next thing I know, the knocking moved to the front door at a louder level too. That's when it hit me that I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear. I couldn't scream or talk, or even move a muscle. My heart was dropping as the knocking moved to another window, closer and closer to my bedroom window, where my curtains were see-through. I still couldn't move. I didn't know what to do or say. I could only sit there as the fear consumed me. I moved my eyes over to the window and my heart stopped when I saw a man peering through. A tall man in a dark ski mask. I could hardly make out any details because it was so dark. I think his mask had some sort of skeleton design on it. He tilted his head slightly, and I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I closed my eyes and started telling myself, it's not real, over and over again. I opened my eyes and there was no one there. I sighed in relief until I heard a loud whisper say, "I'll cut you." Everything suddenly stopped. I really couldn't sleep anymore that night. It didn't feel like a dream, and I've never experienced sleep paralysis before. Everything felt so real. I don't know what had happened, but I pray that I'll never experience anything like that again. It was one of the most frightening moments of my life. The following morning, I asked my dad if he came back from work and if he was knocking on the doors and windows. He said he didn't. I'm a 25-year-old female. Last Friday I had a little time to kill before picking up my kids from school. It was a gorgeous day, so I decided to spend some time cruising the back roads in my hometown, listening to music. I passed a guy with his thumb out, trying to catch a ride, and I almost picked this guy up. He looked to be in his late 30s, early 40s, carrying a fishing pole and a backpack. Pretty innocent looking, I guess. But see, I'm alone, female, and have been taught with the hundreds of hitchhiker gone wrong stories that you should just keep driving. So I kept driving. And as I'm driving, I'm having an internal dialogue of guilt about my decision not to pick this guy up. You know, if I was hitchhiking, I'd hope someone would pick me up. I mean, really, what's the worst thing that could happen? That mixed with my new self-improvement goal of doing things that scare me as often as possible led me to the conclusion that if when I loop back around and he's still walking, I would pick him up. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, he was still there. I was feeling a little nervous pulling over getting him, but what was I going to do? Peel out when he's trying to get in my vehicle? As soon as he gets in, I realize I probably made a horrible mistake. 1. Because he seemed like he was tweaking balls and smelled god-awful. 2. Because this guy was looking at me like I was a feast and he was starved. I didn't realize exactly how rattled I was with my decision until he asked me for a smoke and my hands were shaking so bad that I barely pulled one out of the pack without breaking it. Driving made it easier to hide my nerves, but I was internally freaking out and trying to decide how I would beat this guy's ass if he tried anything. His name was Wayne, and he lives 5 minutes from where I picked him up. Meanwhile, he's telling me that he lost his license due to DUIs, and that he's living in this house with this old man. He was also trying to talk me into hanging out at said house with him, and come over to drink with him the next day. When I finally get to his destination, it's a little shack-like thing surrounded by these junky cars and shit. He gets out and is still trying to convince me to come inside with him. I tell him no and leave. I'm feeling relieved and a little bit proud that I faced a fear of mine. Fast forward to Monday. My instructor says, "Holy shit, apparently someone got murdered down that back road. Do you know anyone down that way?" I said, "Wow, that's ironic. I took a hitchhiker down that road Friday. His name was Wayne, I think." It wasn't even 15 minutes later when I see Wayne's picture on Facebook saying that the police had picked him up for stabbing someone to death in the very house I dropped him off on Friday. Graphic information of how he stabbed him in the lungs and let the victim bleed out in the little shack. And the old man he was living with didn't even exist. I swear, I'm never picking up a hitchhiker again in my life. Okay, so a little backstory. I go to a high school with about 500 people. This happened during my sophomore year. I'm a junior now. This might not be as extreme as other stories, but this is something that still terrifies me, even a year later. Mark had other issues before this happened. He started cutting his arms in class. I was sitting 2 seats over from him and just watched the blood roll down his arm. He ended up being reported to the office and was sent to the YOC for about a month. The YOC is a Youth Opportunity Center. It's basically a mental hospital, juvie center, for kids. He came back and seemed to be fine. He said he was never suicidal and that he only cut his arms for attention, which made sense for him because of his kind of messed up childhood. On the day that everything happened, I had no clue about anything. During my 6th-hour class, the school resource officer appeared at the door of my classroom. One of my friends was standing right behind him. The SRO told my teacher that he needed me immediately. I had no clue what was going on. I just thought I was randomly getting drug tested, which is pretty common in my school. I tried asking why we were going to the office and got no response. He took the 2 of us into a conference room where 2 police officers were standing. They questioned me first. As I walked in the room, he shut and locked the door behind me. One of the police officers blocked the door and the other one blocked the window. I was petrified. I had no clue what was happening. This conversation ensued. No, the SRO was confrontational and aggressive throughout this entire conversation. "Have you heard anything today?" "About what?" "There were threats made against our school. Your name came up in conversation." "What do you mean my name came up in conversation? I haven't heard anything. Who made the threats, and who said I would know anything about it?" "Mark made the threats. We questioned some other people, and your name popped up. They said you might know something." "Who said my name?" "We can't tell you." I understand that they probably couldn't tell me who said it due to confidentiality reasons, but it was so frustrating being locked in there with police officers who are acting like I've done something wrong, especially when I hadn't. To this day, I still have no clue who mentioned my name. Back to the conversation. I have heard nothing. The only class I have with him is in 5th period, and he wasn't there today. We don't talk outside of class, and the only reason we talked in class was because we sat at the same table, so we would have to work together some days. "Are you sure?" "I'm positive. I don't know anything. All of this is news to me." "Okay, you're free to go." They opened the door, took my friend in, and I went back to class. I was kind of in shock. As soon as I walk in through the class door, everyone is bombarding me with questions about what had just happened. I ignored them and put my head down for the rest of the class. Later that night, I saw on Facebook that the school had posted a message. I don't remember what it was exactly due to it being deleted, but from what I remember it was something like, "Parents and students. 2 students reported that threats were made against our school. We handled the situation, and there is nothing to worry about." The actual post was longer, but I honestly don't remember. I told my parents everything that had happened that day, and they immediately wanted more information. I couldn't give it to them. At that point, I didn't know about the hit list or his arrest. All I knew was that he had threatened to shoot up the school. The next day, shit hit the fan. I found out that he had told people about his plans during the first hour, and that he was taken out of class and arrested during our 4th hour. He was gonna do it during our 5th hour, starting with the class that he was in, which I was in too, and then he would head over to the cafeteria. I still get chills when I think about it this very moment. During lunch, my best friend came up to me and told me about the hit list Mark wrote and showed her during the first hour. She didn't get a chance to tell me the day before. The other guy who was there confirmed everything. I was on it. I was the 3rd name down. Evidently, he described it in detail of how he would kill me. Luckily, someone stopped it from happening, or else I would be dead before I got to graduate high school. To this day, I don't know why he wanted to kill me. I barely even spoke to this guy. I was polite in class if I ever had to work with him. We had no negative interactions, so I honestly had no clue what I did to make him so desperately want me dead. As I understand, he had a gun in his locker. It wasn't a joke like his friends thought. He intended to do it. I'm relieved that I'm alive and nothing happened, but I was also out of my mind with horror at the thought of someone plotting my death. About 2 weeks later, my dad and I go into the Dollar General in our town. Keep in mind, my dad has no clue what Mark looks like. We walk in and buy something for dinner, and I see Mark. He's staring at me so intensely that I wanted to run out of the store. I stuck close to my dad and told him to hurry. He looked at me confused, and I told him I would explain later. Mark followed us around the store, and I couldn't breathe. I don't have words to describe how scared I was. My dad and I got what we needed, left the store, and got into the truck. As soon as I was in the truck and the doors were locked, my dad turned to me and asked, "Who was that? He looked like he wanted you dead." I replied that that was Mark. At this point, we were thoroughly panicked, not only because he's roaming free, but because he knew where I lived. We had security cameras, but knowing that this person has expressed the desire to kill you and knows where you live is just terrifying. The school has since acted like nothing happened. In fact, one of the administrators told me that my family was overreacting when we wanted to know if he would be back in school, because according to them, I was never in any real danger. Luckily, the kid is no longer at my school and is currently in jail because he murdered his mother. He pushed her down the stairs, and she was found dead, wrapped up. Thankfully, he was caught, and I don't think he's getting out anytime soon. This occurred in 2017, and is 100% true. Due to the multitude of factors, including the recent death of a close friend, I was depressed at this time in my life. For that reason, my family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was the off-season. It was late November. The weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty besides locals and a few straggling tourists such as ourselves. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island, so we immediately checked into our motel, though that word hardly does this place justice. I call it a motel because the doors to the rooms exited to the outside, but in actuality, our room was one of 20 to 30 quaint guest house looking buildings arranged in some sort of horseshoe shaped around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you'd reach the room we were given. Essentially at the corner before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path led to the street, the other further into a secluded maze of rooms. One day after exploring, and just having finished dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Almost as dark as my headspace after the dinner conversation took a left-hand turn and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them that I just needed to sleep. I did, immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up with my mom saying my name in a harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds, my parents' bed closer to the door and mine further into the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I don't blame her, considering my mental state at the time. Groggily, I rolled over. "What?" I asked, as my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming through the curtains. I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who is she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking to see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. Understand how horrifically startling it was to be on an island in the middle of the ocean and wake up to see a hooded stranger looming over you. This moment seemed to last forever. Life isn't like movies, where characters unleash a blood-curdling scream. Sometimes the only thing that comes out is something panicked and guttural. My mom's words became low as she said my dad's name in a dire voice that I had never heard her use before. Then the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards us, but instead crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regards to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew 2 things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and it's not acting in any sort of way that I can understand. As opposed to the infinite moment of the figure standing over us mere seconds ago, the series of events that unfold when my hulking, ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly we went out the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom screaming, "Get him! Get him!" My dad running down the path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shutting through the sheer adrenaline. "I'm gonna fucking kill you!" I ran down the other path towards the street. When I got there, there was no sign of the intruder. It became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quickly walking back, his head low. He gets really close to me, and I hear him say, "It's a fucking kid." The explanation: some young teen, tall and lanky, wearing all black including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room. Our room. The one time my parents had happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he entered, and seeing a tall person in a hoodie, she thought it was me, assuming that I left the room in a depressive episode. When the hooded figure crouched, that was him realizing the mistake and panicking. He was scared of us. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugs this kid, who was now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me with murder in his eyes. So I'm a 23-year-old female. I live in a townhouse with my 2 children, 2 years and a 6-month-old. My fiance did live with us until 2 weeks ago when I caught him trying to get with other women, and I made him move out. That's important to the story. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and when he did live with us, my ex worked evenings. Let me set the scene. We live in a tiny town in northern Pennsylvania. My line of townhouses sit in front of a big field that runs to a line of woods. As far as I'm aware, those woods stretch for at least a few miles, and I'm not aware of any houses in there, or any roads that lead through them. My living room has 3 windows that look onto the field, and my bedroom on the 2nd floor only has 1 window that faces that way as well. People tend to walk their dogs back in the fields, and kids sometimes play back there, but I rarely see anyone close to my house. For that reason, I tend to leave my blinds and curtains open because I enjoy the view. So in July of 2019, I was laying on my bed trying to fall asleep. All the lights were off, but I had my window and blinds open since it was so warm. I was looking out the window and I noticed a small red and white light just outside. I got up and looked to realize that the lights were coming from a drone. I ran downstairs to where my fiance at the time was sitting in the living room and ran to the window. I told him what I saw, but of course, when he went out to look, it was gone. I was kind of paranoid that the drone could have had a camera on it and someone could be watching me with it. I kept my blinds closed for a while after that. Fast forward to January of this year. I guess I stupidly got comfortable and assumed that whoever it was flying the drone was just a one-time creep. My blinds were open and I had just gotten out of the shower. I was sitting on my bed, pretty much naked except for my underwear, scrolling on my phone, when out of the corner of my eye I saw the lights again, out of my dark window. It was that damn drone again. I ran out of the room and waited a few minutes. I peeked back into my room and it was gone. I quickly shut my blinds and got dressed. Honestly, I felt sick at how stupid I was to leave my windows open again, especially when I was practically naked. Now for the really disturbing part. My 2-year-old son and I were out on the fields 2 weeks ago, 3 days after I kicked out my fiancée. I had my 6-year-old strapped to me in a baby carrier. Probably about a half hour after we'd been out there, I heard a slight whirling noise coming towards us. I looked up and it was that damn drone flying towards us. I looked around and didn't see anyone. It stopped right over us. I freaked out and grabbed my son and dragged him into the house, looking back at the tree line every so often as we went. I knew they had to have been hiding in there. I went inside, closed the blinds, and called my mom and told her about the situation. She told me to just keep an eye out. My son likes to line his toys up along the windowsill, so I figured it wouldn't hurt to have them open just an inch or so. A little while later, after we ate dinner and it was almost dark, I was feeding my 6-month-old and my son was playing. He was standing over by the window, lining up his toys. He started saying, "Dada, Dada." I assumed that he was just missing his father and dismissed him by saying he was going to see him this weekend. He kept saying, "Dada, Dada." I looked up and saw him pointing out the window, under the little gap that the blinds didn't cover. I froze. I remember that he calls any man with facial hair Dada, because it reminds him of his own father. But there was no way someone would be bold enough to actually come up to my window. Not when my neighbors are literally right there. Anyone could see them. But there aren't really any lights back there, so unless someone actually stepped out of their house, I guess no one would actually see them. Maybe it was my ex, but he should have been at work at that time. I ran to the window and moved my son. I didn't want to lift the blinds, but honestly, I was sure that it had to be the person who was creeping on me for the past year, and wanted to see who it was. I pushed the blinds up, and was looking at a man who I definitely never seen before. He was crouching in front of me. He was bald, with a mustache and a goatee. I have no idea how old he was. He could have been anywhere from 30 to 50. When he saw me, he smiled and stood up. I yelled and told him to fuck off and that I was calling the cops. He just stood there, smiling at me, like some freak. I was about to close the blinds again when he said something I couldn't hear. I told him to leave again and he said, "I just want to talk to you." I shook my head no and yelled the same thing to him. He started slapping his hands on the window, yelling, "No, no, no," over and over. I grabbed my phone, scared that he was going to try to break in. I dialed 911. My kid was crying from the yelling, and I felt on the verge of tears. I told the operator what was going on. The whole time I was on the phone, the man was pounding on my window, screaming. He was yelling all kinds of nonsense, and I only caught some of it. He said that he's been watching me for months, that I'm beautiful. He wants me to come with him, and that he'll kill my children if I don't. The operator told me to go into the upstairs room and hide until the police arrive. My town doesn't have a police department, so we rely on the state police. She said it would be about 20 minutes, but to stay on the phone with her. The man was practically punching the window now, and was just screaming like a maniac. I was about to grab my kids and run upstairs when I heard someone else screaming. The man bolted. I looked out to see my neighbor and his girlfriend. I opened the window, and my neighbor said that he heard the man, so he ran around the building. He said when the guy heard him, that he ran back into the woods and disappeared into the tree line. They said they had also called the police. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They did a quick search around the building and in the trees, but obviously didn't find anything. I've been super paranoid since, and stayed with my parents for a few nights after it happened. I don't know why this guy targeted me, or why he waited so long to do something. I'm just happy that my neighbors were there to intervene, or God knows what would have happened. When I was 15, my mom, my younger sister and I were living in a not so nice apartment. My mom took the couch and my sister and I got the bedrooms. I got first choice, so obviously I chose the one with a window. So there was a main floor to the building, which was the lobby, and then the floor above it, which was considered the first floor. I mention this because every other apartment I lived in, the first floor was the first floor. Outside the apartment windows was a fire escape with a landing on the first floor above the lobby. It was summer, about 4 a.m. I was laying in bed trying to sleep with the lights off. From the moonlight, I noticed something outside my window. Then, a flashlight clicks on and it's a man maybe in his late 30s. I threw my blanket over my face and didn't move because I was terrified. He starts looking around my room with a flashlight, which felt like minutes, but in reality was probably only 60 seconds. Then he just left. I don't know where he went, and as far as I know, he didn't come back. The next morning when I leave the building, police were there, and there was a pile of blood on the stairs between the lobby and first floor. I have no idea if it was related, and it's been about 15 years, so I'm not sure if I'll ever know. But to the man with a flashlight outside my window, let's not meet again. For some background, I live in the UK, and I go to a school with a uniform. I go to a large all-girls school, with about 8 classes of 30, and I've heard about creeps lingering outside the school before, but they are usually sorted out quite quickly by the school staff. At the time, I was in year 9, so about 13 years old, and only about 4'9". I had a big homework assignment due, and because I didn't have a computer at home, I stayed late at the school to do it in the ICT suite. As it was the beginning of the school year, it was relatively dark at 5 p.m., which is when I got out of school, and this event took place. I had to get the bus home, as both my parents were working. The bus stop outside my school was fairly busy. There was a couple of other people and me. I had my back up against the fence and noticed a man under the bus stop, facing away from, but next to, the road and opposite the fence I was leaning on. I was aware of my surroundings, as I've had previous experiences with old creeps, and I'm just a generally paranoid person. The man didn't strike me as particularly interested, but I did notice him glance over at me from the corner of my eye. I then saw a bus and assumed it was mine, so I stepped forward to check. It was not my bus, which was annoying as I was cold and I didn't have a coat. As I went to step back against the fence, I almost stood back into the man that was under the bus stop originally, but he had moved directly behind me. He had his arm up against the pole next to the bus stop. I felt a bit concerned, but couldn't move as the other side of me had all the people waiting to get on the bus that was coming. It felt like forever, as I could feel the man's breath on top of my head come and collect all the other people at the bus stop. Once the last person got on the bus, I quickly moved out of the man's area and back to the fence. He also moved, so he was back under the bus stop, sitting across from me, staring at the ground. At last, my bus came after about 3 minutes like that. I didn't want to give away the fact that I was getting on the bus, but I had to wave it down, so I stood next to the road to signal it over. As I got on, my heart was really going, as the man was back right behind me. I had already got my bus card out and scanned it very quickly, and only saw a few people downstairs. Normally there might be a few people upstairs, so that's where I headed. That was probably my biggest mistake. I got up there and it was completely empty. Well, I couldn't really go back down at this point, but I knew the man had already gotten on and would most likely be coming upstairs. I did the next best thing. I sat in the outside seat directly in front of the bus camera, which I kept looking directly at just in case something happened. The man came upstairs, as expected, and he sat at the back of the bus, not before looking and smiling at me as he passed. It was then that I had the idea that probably saved me. I live on a quiet street, and it's already dark now, so there was no way I was getting off the bus at my stop with this man. I pulled out my phone and earbuds. I put one of the earbuds in my ear and text my friend to play along when I FaceTime her and informed her about my situation. She understood and, along with some small talk, I talked loudly about how my mom was mad that I stayed late at school and that she texted me saying that she was waiting at the door for me and that I told her that I was only 10 minutes away. In reality, I told my mom that I was staying late that morning before I left for school, and my mom was at work 45 minutes away, and so was my dad, about an hour and a half away, which limited their access to either of their phones. The bus was at my stop to get off now, and I took a deep breath and stood up. I looked back at the man, and he was looking at me as I walked down the stairs. My friend was screen recording at this point, just in case something went down. Thankfully, he didn't follow me down the stairs. But as I was walking off the bus, I looked back to see him against the back window, hands and fists staring at me. That is when I took my flimsy school shoes off and sprinted to my house, as the next bus stop was still in eyesight. There were two main roads that led down to my street. Once I was down my street and far enough away that you couldn't see the top of it anymore, I told my friend about him being up against the window. I put my shoes back on and sped walked the rest of my way to my house. My family still doesn't know anything about this, though I was quite proud of myself of the way I handled the situation and how I ran with no shoes on. This happened a few days ago, and I'm extremely shaken up. Some backstory. I live on the second floor of a 3-level apartment. We have a crawl space that connects all of the apartments. We're not sure why it's there, and none of us would attempt to go inside, so we felt pretty safe. The other night the sun was setting, but it wasn't pitch black out yet or anything. I was walking through my living room when I see a short woman on the fire escape looking through my windows. This was extremely bizarre, considering it was still semi-light out, and she had literally got into our fire escape somehow. We have 2 windows that the fire escape reaches. She was looking through both of them, but couldn't see me. I crawled on the ground, and my heart was racing as I saw her try to open one of the windows. I didn't know what the fuck to do, because my phone was in the other room. After what seemed like an eternity, she finally left. I went into my room to get my phone to text my landlord and call the cops. I came back into the living room and was looking through the windows to see if I could locate her, when all of a sudden I hear a weird noise coming from the ceiling. We have one of those tile ceilings, made out of separate slabs of cork. I look up to see one of the slabs lifted up and 2 eyes staring at me. I have no clue how she got into the crawl space so quickly, but I grabbed the nearest thing next to me, which was a broom, and started hitting her with it through the ceiling. I called the cops and she crawled away. They showed up and searched the place, but didn't find her until a few days later when she was on someone else's fire escape. The cops say she was definitely on some hard drugs, and that she was violent towards them. I'm glad she's gone, but whoever the crazy lady was that came through the ceiling, let's not meet again. For the past 2 months or so, I've been experiencing people trying to get into my home. Now, I wouldn't say that they tried forcefully, but if it's not the doorknob being messed with, I'm hearing the back porch door being slammed. I haven't notified the police, mainly because it wouldn't happen regularly, and just thought it would be a waste of time, seeing that all the evidence I have is noises that I've heard. But last night's encounter might have been the nail in the coffin, as I'm generally creeped out by it this time. So here it goes. It was maybe around 11:30 p.m. I was laying in bed, enjoying another night after work, watching TV, and that's when I hear a slight tap coming from my brother's window. This made me a bit tense since the other occurrences happened earlier in the night, but this time it was way later than usual, and I had never heard tapping on the window before. I stayed quiet, and maybe not even 5 minutes later, I hear it again, but this time it's coming from my room. Some time passes by, and that's when I hear a sudden knocking coming from the front door. I continue to stay in silence, hoping that they would just leave, and that's when I hear them messing with the doorknob. A few attempts are made, and then everything goes silent once again, until they start harmonizing with each other. This is when I decided to pull out my phone and record. After that, I guess they decided to leave for good, as I didn't have the guts to interact with them. All I know is that things are getting freakier than I could ever imagine, and I don't even know how to begin to get rid of them. So this happened to me a couple years ago, when my now husband and I were living in a townhouse that was in a pretty decent area. My husband was working the third shift as a corrections officer at our local corrections facility, and I was working as a waitress. It was an unusually warm night in the middle of March, so I took advantage of it and decided to take my husband's 80-pound Alaskan Malamute Husky mixed dog on a quick walk around the neighborhood near our complex. We get to the end of the street that leads into the complex we live in, and across the street is a Marathon gas station. I noticed as the dog, Luke, stopped to relieve himself that there was a guy across the street at the gas station with a case of beer in his hands. I had my phone out texting a friend and looked up to notice the guy was near a stop sign, also relieving himself on the sign. I felt really awkward and instantly put my phone away and led Luke down the street on our path. At this point, I think the guy noticed us, and he crossed the street to where Luke and I had just been. I hear him walking a few feet behind me, and just keep my head staring at my phone with Luke glued to my hip. After about 10 seconds, I hear the guy's steps getting closer. Luke realizes there's someone behind us and stops dead in his tracks. Mind you, he's a big dog compared to my 5'2" self, but I can handle him pretty easily, as he was very well trained by my husband. I noticed his ears were perked up, and his tail was straight up. I was glad that he was aware of our surroundings, but I still wanted to keep moving away from this guy. I just got the weirdest feeling. This guy finally catches up to us, so I tighten my grip on Luke's leash and pull him closer to me and step onto the grass to allow the guy to pass us and to keep Luke out of his way. Does this guy keep going and pass? Nope. When I thought he was about to pass us, I shouted out a small apology because Luke was pulling on his leash a little, trying to investigate this guy, and most people did get intimidated by him just because of his size. The guy stops and just stares at me for a minute, long enough for me to smell the cigarettes and booze rolling off of him, and notice that he's probably in his mid to late 20s, dark hair, scruffy looking, and just dirty. He smiles and then finally notices Luke trying to get at him and asks, "Cute dog, what's his name?" Instead of making up a name, I just said, "Luke." He then proceeds to ask me if he could pet my dog, and before I can give an answer, he leans down and starts petting Luke's head. Luke did not like that. Luke jumped at him as a warning, and that guy backed up, chuckling. I apologized and mentioned that he was very protective and made up a lie that he was trained by my dad's former canine unit. My dad was a software developer. Instantly, I saw this guy's face change. I don't know what to call it, but it looked like he was put off by it. He asked me what my name was, and I gave him a fake name. He then asked if I lived around here, and I said that I was visiting a friend of mine for the weekend. He made a sudden step towards me, and I'm not even lying when I say this. I've never heard my husband's dog growl in the 5 years that I've been with him, but the sound that came out of my dog sounded like something from nightmares. Luke's hair was spiked up on his spine, and he was throwing himself on his back legs, kicking at the guy with his front legs. He put himself completely between myself and the guy, and was snapping at him. This freaked the dude out, so much that he stumbled backwards, nearly dropping his beer. He quickly said, "We'll have a nice night, cutie," and stumbled off down the road. When I say that my heart was pounding, it was deafening. I grabbed Luke's leash so hard and sprinted between the buildings until I got back to the townhouse. I locked the doors and collapsed by the front door. Luke was in my face the whole time, kissing me and whining. This dog is the sweetest and most gentle creature I have ever met, and hearing him growl and seeing him react the way he did made me realize even more that I needed to get out of that situation, and fast. In late June, my boyfriend and I, both 19, were headed back from Walmart in his town. We live an hour apart, and I was visiting. I was driving on somewhat of a back road, and there's a four-way stop. Across from us was what looked like a work truck, parked behind another car and flashing its brights. Nobody else was at the intersection, so I decided to go ahead and keep driving. As soon as I pulled out, a car came speeding, somewhere around 90 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone, and almost T-boned my car on the passenger side. Luckily, I sped up and got out of its way, and the car swerved and stopped on the side of the road and flashed its hazards. We were freaked out. Maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, but I kept driving because no one was hurt, probably just shaken up. So we keep driving, and my boyfriend is guiding me through the roads, and we were talking about how bizarre it was that we didn't even see or hear that other car. Then I noticed there's a car behind us. It's probably 1,000 feet behind us, so I didn't think anything of it. Then it keeps getting closer and closer. Finally, the car is on my ass. Once he's on my ass, he turns on his extremely bright lights and nearly blinds me. We realize that it's the work truck that was across the intersection. I ducked down out of the way of my rearview mirror that was blinding me so I could see the road and keep driving, even speeding up a little. My boyfriend tells me that maybe we should pull over. Maybe someone was hurt and they were trying to flag us down. But we're on a back road with absolutely no light posts and nowhere to pull over that's well lit. Eventually, my boyfriend had to hold a wheel for me because I couldn't see at all. My vision was blurry and spotty. I started to pull into a neighborhood, but the truck started passing me and we almost got into an accident. The neighborhood was dark, of course. The truck slows down to a stop and backs up so it's directly behind us, still on the main road while we parked in this neighborhood. The driver starts shining a flashlight at my car, mostly at me, then goes over to my boyfriend. After it gets to him, he shuts off the light and the truck slowly pulls off and leaves. My boyfriend and I were shaken up, and once I regained my vision, I drove back to his apartment, wary of all the cars around us. We told his dad about it, and he said it's a good thing that we didn't get out of the car. People get murdered all the time from this stuff. We thought it was just so weird, but thinking back on it, the driver probably only saw me and targeted me, and then once he realized that there was 2 people in the car, they didn't want to deal with it and left. They wanted me, it seems like. What do you think? This just happened. I got off work and went to my mom's to help her and my dad set up their new Alexa TV that they had just got. It ended up taking a while because we had to run to the store to grab an adapter, so I didn't leave their house until 8 p.m. And by the time I got home, which I recently moved into a few weeks ago and live alone, it was closer to 9 p.m. and pitch black. I had my hands full of a few things that I forgot at my parents' since I stayed with them for a few months before I found my place. Anyway, I'm walking up the sidewalk to my apartment when I hear him calling out to me. Hey, excuse me. Hello? Hey. I have one headphone in, listening to YouTube stories, and I try to pretend like I didn't hear him. Not to be rude, but because it was pitch black outside, and I had been up since 6 a.m. and was dead tired, I don't like small talk, and I'm bad at it. Eventually, I turn around, and we introduce ourselves. Immediately, the hairs on my arm prickle, and I get this feeling in my gut. This guy is sizing me up. He wants to know where I live, so he can break into my place, rob me. It's just something I know. It's not even a feeling, but a fact. The entire time we're talking, maybe 10 minutes, his hands are in his pockets, his hood is up, and he keeps looking around like expecting to see someone. Granted, it's cold, but we live in Arizona, so it's not that cold. But this also puts me on edge. Then he begins asking about me, how long ago I moved in, and which unit I'm in. He's obviously going to see which unit I'm in when I walk into it, so I just tell him. He makes small talk for a few minutes, and then asks if it's just me. I explain, oh no, I've got my 2 dogs. I go on to say how big they are, how protective they are, and how they are roaming freely in my apartment while I'm at work, which is all true. He asks if I take them on walks and how often. Basically, how often do you leave your apartment empty? I explained to him that I have to be careful because, while my dogs love me and act like big babies with me, they are very protective, so going out is a challenge because I have to be careful about people coming up to us and how my dogs react to them. I turn the conversation around to ask which unit he's in, how long he's been there, who he lives with. He seems uncomfortable and gives me vague answers, waving his hand behind him and saying, that one. He seems uncomfortable about me trying to clarify which apartment he's in, so he tapers off the conversation and we say our goodbyes. I unlock my door, give my dogs the command to bark, which they do, and it's loud and vicious sounding. I immediately give them love and call my mom, give her his name, what he looks like, his vague portrayal at what apartment he's in, and a reminder of her panic phrase, so if I ever say it, she knows to calmly end the call and send the cops. Now I'm just sitting in my apartment freaking out on every little sound, with my dogs piled on top of me. I'm going to call the non-emergency police and ask them to do a drive-by to make me feel safer. Update. I'm sitting on my couch replying to comments. It's 9:30 on a Friday night and I'm hearing the softest knocking. If I weren't 3 feet from the front door, I wouldn't have heard it. I have both my dogs out. My pit bull barked, and everything is locked up tight. Obviously I didn't answer, but I don't have a peephole, so I have no idea who it was. Am I overreacting? Second update. I just got home, and I noticed the light on in my car. The windows are up, and the passenger side is locked, and you can only open the driver's door a certain way, so I don't see anyone opening it. And his number is on my window, on the outside, with a message saying text me. On the back of the paper is information about a court date and such. I'm going to call the non-emergency police and add this to my report, and I've updated everyone keeping an eye on me. So yeah, I'm still freaked out. For 6 months last year, I lived in the north of Spain. About a week before I was going to move back to Ireland, my friend and I were at my house, having dinner and drinking a little. I was renting an apartment in the city, and my roommate was an older lady, maybe in her 50s. I'm 20. That night, my roommate left to have dinner with her friends. About a minute after she had left, someone buzzed our door to be let into our building. I looked at the camera and didn't recognize the woman. She looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s, so I assumed that it was one of my roommate's friends, and she was coming over to meet her or something. I buzzed her into the building, assuming they would meet in the lobby. At first, I didn't buzz her in because I didn't recognize her, and she walked away from the door, but then I hit the buzzer as soon as she walked away, and then myself walked away from the camera, meaning I couldn't see if she actually entered or not, assuming that if she didn't enter, she would just text my roommate. Boy, I was wrong. The woman came up to my apartment building on the 6th floor. She came up just 2 minutes after my roommate left, so I know she didn't take the stairs, and I know they must have seen each other when my roommate got off the lift and the lady got in. Realizing that this was weird, I didn't open the door when she rings it. I looked through the peephole just to confirm that it was nobody I knew. At this point, I back away from the door and gesture to my friend to be silent. We creep back to my room, which is on the far side of the apartment, and I began calling my roommate, who wasn't picking up. Meanwhile, this lady is still ringing my doorbell. My roommate is not picking up, and my friend is just telling me to open the door. In her mind, it was a woman, so she must be harmless. I tell her that she's an idiot for underestimating the female sex. Women can be criminals too. She keeps telling me to open the door, and I refuse. She keeps ringing, and I keep looking out the peephole. At this point, I understand that if she knew my roommate or was looking for someone, she would just called or text them. She didn't take out her phone. She just stayed eerily silent, didn't call out names or ask if anyone was home. This was just weird to me. I finally get through to my roommate. She says she wasn't expecting anyone, and she doesn't know anyone in that age range. She asks if I'm okay, and I say I'm fine. Now it's been at least 20 minutes. I know that the lady knows that someone's home because the lights are on, and my understanding is that's why she's not leaving. I continue watching her through the peephole and see her go into the lift for a minute and then come back up again. The lift is very loud, and I would have heard it move. It didn't. She just went in and came out. In my mind, this means someone was waiting in the lift for her. This screams sketchy to me. After about 40 minutes, she leaves. I run to our hall and flick on the outside camera. This lady left the building with 2 men. They all had backpacks on. I am a paramedic and have been for about 10 years. Working in emergency medicine, you'll get to see the weirdest and worst of people. So it's not uncommon for these types of stories to exist. However, in my 10 years, I have never experienced pure terror incarnate like I had about 6 years ago. I will not be revealing specific or identifying details as it pertains to privacy. This may be a bit long, but it's definitely worth a listen. About 6 years ago, I moved to another city for work. I worked for the 911 ambulance service that responded to calls in the city, as well as the county, which had a few smaller towns. The city itself was not large, maybe about 100,000 people. Working for the service required working 24-hour shifts. It wasn't particularly busy. You maybe get 5 or 10 calls in 24 hours, and generally get some decent sleep during the night. The city was a pretty rough place, as the oil industry had boomed there, which drew all sorts of folks from all around the country to work in the oil fields nearby. One night in January, me and my partner, who was an EMT basic, received a call in the next town over. It was about 2 a.m. when the call came out, and the only information we had was that the person in the apartment called 911 after hearing the downstairs neighbor screaming for help. We responded emergent, as the details were very limited. When we arrived on the scene, police and fire department were already there, and we were getting ready to make our entrance into the building with them. The person who called 911 was there, and told us which apartment she heard the screaming from. We attempted to pound on the door at first, to get the resident to come to the door. When no one answered, the fire department got ready to spread the door and make an entry. Luckily, the landlord showed up and gave us the key to the unit. As we opened the door, the creepiness started. The apartment was pitch black, not a single light, as if no one was home. The police entered first with their flashlights. We followed. Looking around the apartment, the kitchen and dining room looked like a hoarder's nest. I'm not exaggerating when I say there was literally a 5-foot-tall mountain of garbage, food, dishes, in the kitchen, and the same thing in the living room, but with magazines, clothes, and garbage. This meant that there was a very narrow walkway to navigate the apartment. Officers proceeded down the hallway, ahead where the bedroom and bathroom was. One of the officers stopped at the bathroom door, as there was a light shining from underneath it. The officer opened the door and just stood in the hallway. With a flat tone, he said, "She's in here." I walked into the bathroom. The first thing I noticed was the light of the bathroom. It was a very pale, yellow light coming from a single bulb on the ceiling, similar to those old heat lamps that used to be common in bathrooms. The light gave off an odd vibe, as it was just a natural light. The next thing I noticed was the lack of anything in the bathroom. No floor mats, no toilet cover, no towels, no knickknacks. Just nothing. Empty. Except the vanity on top in the bowl of the sink were approximately 20 to 30 makeup bottles piled up. Some were open and leaking, causing there to be powders and liquids everywhere. The last thing I noticed was the body of an elderly woman laying naked in her tub. As I walked closer, I could see her laying on her side, nearly in the fetal position. Her skin was pale, and there was about 8 inches of water in the tub. Looking at her face, her eyes were closed, and her head was against the bottom of the tub, with her mouth and nose completely submerged underwater. My partner steps behind me. He suggests we call the coroner and inform him of the body. 2 officers pile into the bathroom behind my partner, so there's 4 of us in this tiny bathroom, with me next to the lady in the tub. With me being who I am, I decided to do my due diligence and at least try to make sure the lady was dead. I kneeled down next to the tub and reached my arm in and put my fingers on her neck to attempt to check for a pulse. In that instant, without a warning or the slightest hint of movement, the woman springs up out of the bathtub with the agility and speed of a feral cat. The only reaction I was able to manage was to just stand up as quick as possible. As I stood there staring at her, she stared back at me, eyes wide as can be. Before she started screaming at me, she attempted to cover herself with her hands as best as she could, while sitting in the water still. I quickly turned around to notice that everyone who was behind me in the bathroom bolted out of there. Not a single soul in sight. I tried to steady myself and tried to calm down the lady, telling her who I was and why I was there. She denied screaming and told me that she does this every morning as she has some kind of joint condition and soaking in warm water helps ease her joint pain. Now at this point, I have my doubts and I have to question this lady's sanity. I question her about self-harm and address what could be potentially interpreted as suicidal behavior. She denies all of it. The next step is to determine her mental capacity to ensure that she's in the right frame of mind to make reasonable and appropriate decisions. She answers all my questions appropriately, and at this point, per law, she's able to refuse any and all care, as she is mentally sound. I asked her if she will allow me to check out her vitals so that I can be sure that she is healthy, and I can add it to my report. She refuses and tells me to get out of her house, which she has a right to do. I acknowledge and have her sign a refusal form. As I leave the bathroom, my partner, the 2 officers that were in the bathroom with me, along with the other 2 officers and firefighters that were waiting in the apartment, are just staring at me with eyes wide and gaping mouths, speechless. I don't say a word as we all leave the apartment. Once we are outside, I had the most uneasy, uncontrolled fit of laughter. My partner and the officers started laughing too. I thought I might have shit myself. My partner told me that all she remembers is seeing her move, hearing me say, "Oh fuck," which I don't even remember, and running out of the bathroom. I wish I could say that I never saw that lady again, but that would be untrue. This one will be a little shorter since you already have my backstory. Like I said, after this call, I was able to laugh it off once my heart stopped racing. I figured that I would never have to see this lady again, and that gave me comfort. I told the story several times to my family, friends, and coworkers just because of the sheer shock value. This part of the story, I've only told a couple people, because most probably can't stomach it. So be warned, this contains some graphic content. About 3 months after the first call with the bathtub lady, I was working with another EMT basic partner. Not the same one as before, but he is well aware of the story. So the day is going by like normal, and then nightfall comes. I'm hoping to get some sleep, as generally the night is a little calmer. Each of our stations have a few bedrooms with twin beds that allow us to sleep somewhat comfortably. Take off my boots and lay down and doze. I always keep the radio turned way up and by my head so I can wake up if we get a call. Sure enough, tones drop on the radio and I wake up. Looking at the clock, it's around 4 a.m. Radio traffic request an ambulance for a welfare check on an individual that had not been seen for a while. Me and my partner get up, put our boots on, and start responding to the address. As we get closer, I start recognizing the area. Before I even get to the building, I tell my partner, "I swear to God, if this is the same fucking lady." He laughs and we continue. As we pull up to the scene, sure as shit, same fucking building. At this point, my heart starts to race again. A few officers are already on the scene. As I get out of the ambulance, one of the officers comes up and tells me, "The lady that we are here for has a friend that works at the gas station nearby. The friend told 911 that the lady comes to visit her every day, but the friend hasn't seen her in weeks." He also told me that there's an odor coming from the apartment complex. If you work in EMS or have been around such, you know what that means. If not, then I won't spoil it just yet. I asked the officer if she's familiar with this person, or if she's heard the story of my last encounter. The officer tells me that she is not, but her other 2 co-workers behind her were on the original call with me, and are smiling, but not saying a word. I tell the officer who the person is, and our last run in with her. The officer just raises an eyebrow a bit, and says, "Okay." So we approach the apartment complex yet again. As I open the main door, you can immediately smell the odor permeating through the entire complex. We walk downstairs to the door of the lady's apartment. I bang on it a few times and shout, "Ambulance." No response. Officers bang on the door. No response. We try to get a hold of the landlord again to give us access, but he's unavailable. Over the radio, I request the fire department and request that they bring the door spreader. The fire department arrives and they come downstairs. They set up the door spreader. If you don't know what a door spreader is, it's a tool that the fire department places between the two door jambs and uses a lever to start pressuring the door jamb apart, freeing the latch from the door frame so you can get in. As we finally get the door open, the awful smell spills out of the apartment. Same thing as last time. Pitch black in the apartment, piles of garbage everywhere around the apartment, 5 feet high, that barely allows you to move through. This time it's a bit different. There are thousands of flies buzzing around. Again, the officers enter first, with us following with our flashlights. One of the male officers gets down the hallway to the bathroom and opens the door. He looks back at me, shakes his head, and continues forward. My EMT partner, who is pretty new at this, is right behind me. I turn to him and tell him to wait in the hallway, and that I'll let him know when I need him. I was trying to be nice and spare him. The officer continues down the hallway towards the bedroom. At this point, the anxiety is increasing because now we are in uncharted territory once again. I have no idea what we're going to find. The officer eventually makes his way into the bedroom. I see him shine his lights into the bedroom, then uses a bent elbow to cover his mouth and nose, and waves over to me. As I walk to him, the smell gets extremely stronger. I peer into the bedroom with our flashlights, and that's when I see her. The bedroom is set up with a bed in the middle of the room, with a headboard pressed against the wall. So there's a small space on either side of the foot of the bed, or at least what would have been, if the floor wasn't filled to the height of the bed with clothes, magazines, books, food, and garbage. At the foot of the bed are 2 large 4-foot tall piles of random shit that are at the base and are about 4 feet in diameter. I know it's hard to visualize, but picture 2 large shaped mounds side by side at the foot of the bed. In the tiny space between the 2 large mounds, at the foot of the bed, lies Bathroom Lady. Now this lady was a very small old lady. When I saw her the first time, she maybe weighed 90 pounds. She was also a white lady. Stunned for a moment, I stand next to an officer and just look. This is the part that gets grotesque. Bathroom Lady is laying perfectly on her back, with her arms folded up and crossed in front of her, just like you see a skeleton doing in the movies. Bathroom Lady's skin looks almost like paper. It is dried out and shrunken, turning black and rotting. The levels of decomposition from her is one I haven't seen before. Her hip bones were visible where the skin had cracked and receded. Her kneecaps were coming out from her skin. A few ribs were just barely visible, poking through the skin, on the side of her upper abdomen area. Her hair was beginning to fall out. Her lips were gone. Her eyes were gone. I got a bit closer to look, and all I kept thinking was, if you wake up, this officer's gonna draw and shoot you in the head. I walked a little closer. She was almost perfectly preserved, like a mummy. There was absolutely nothing left of her eyes. The sockets were completely empty, with the exception of a few maggots crawling around her sockets. From behind me, I hear quite loud, muffled gags. I walk back out to my partner. I tell him, "Sorry man, but we need the body bag, and I need your help." Everyone else walks outside to get some fresh air. The officer that was in the bedroom with me gagged a few more times outside, but luckily didn't vomit. The one good thing about this is, we had recently been given really nice PARP respirators from FEMA for the recent Ebola outbreak. My partner grabbed the body bag, and I grabbed the PARPs. We put our gear on and walked back inside. The officer that was with me, like a fucking champ, came back inside as well, without a respirator, and held a flashlight for us. Me and my partner spent maybe 10 minutes just clearing out all the trash that we could to make enough room to get the body bag down next to the bathtub lady. Once we got enough room, the sketchy part came. If you have ever seen a body with that amount of decomposition, it's very brittle. We attempted to move her over as carefully as we could, as not to break anything. However, when we attempted to move her, she was stuck. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was at the head, my partner was at the feet trying to move her. I put my arm down her back and neck to support her head so it didn't break off. I got down to look as I lifted to see what we were getting stuck on. As I lifted, I saw, but it was already too late. As I lifted, the skin on her back was stuck to the carpet. so as I lifted her, it started peeling off her ribs and spine. We had no other choice, as we were unable to cut the carpet at this time. We lifted her up, all our skin came off of her back and stayed stuck to the floor, almost like some sick chalk outline, which is when I saw it. What seemed to be like 1,000 maggots crawling around on the side of her skin, between her skin and her back. We moved her gently into the bag, luckily not breaking anything. We got the bag out and into the ambulance, where we would transport her to the funeral home, with our windows rolled down, and quickly, so we wouldn't have to stay with her in the ambulance. So that's my story about Bathtub Lady. Sorry for the gross details. What we figured is she died shortly after our first encounter with her, and that we may have been the last ones to see her alive. This is my brother's girlfriend's story. She doesn't have a Reddit, but I told her about this subreddit, and she wanted to share her story. Because it's creepy, but also because you can learn from it. I go to school in a big city that is one of the least safe cities in the United States. I chose this school for nursing, and definitely not for the location. I live in a row house, off campus with 3 other girls. Cheaper and nicer than dorms, or so we thought. I guess you get what you pay for. We are all girls and sophomores in college. As you would guess, we go out for drinks, come back to things that we don't remember. We just started our rent in August, 3 floors, plus a basement, which was padlocked by the owner. Understandable, we would definitely have parties down there to avoid immediate cleanup. The house was great, amazing location to school and work. I am a CNA who works odd hours, which will be important later. It was not expensive and in good condition. I had never lived with this many people before. Just one roommate, so before we would definitely know if someone had misplaced or changed something. I started to notice that my snacks would either be half gone or completely gone. I was getting annoyed, but in a house of many people, it was too much work to try to figure out who ate it, so I just ignored it. Slowly, as girls do, we started making comments about someone eating our food, but in a passive-aggressive way. We all just let it go, cause who wants a whole house fight? I worked until about 11 o'clock in the NICU, and get home about 11:30 mostly on weeknights. I started to notice pants left out, or snack wrappers around. I thought it was odd cause none of my roommates had done this before, but I just think, oh, they probably drank a bottle of wine and went to bed and forgot about this. Again, my roommate started making comments. This time, we started asking because it was getting annoying that all our food being gone and things being left out. I knew it was one of them, but who wants to admit that they ate someone else's snack when in college snacks are in high commodity? We chalked it up to the girl who always smokes and eats her weight in food, but she swore it wasn't her. This went on for about 2 months. It got more obvious someone was clearly taking everyone's food. Definitely the girl who always smokes. I see her as being someone that would eat the whole snack pantry at night. I wish it was her. One night at work, I was about to get off, but a situation happened and I didn't end up leaving until 12:30. I took the bus home. I carry pepper spray, a taser, and a pocket knife, don't worry. I got home and was about to collapse. I wanted to go to bed as soon as possible. I walk in the front door, and the stairs are directly in front of you. You can also see down the side into the kitchen. I walk in and saw someone in the kitchen, but I was too tired to say hi, thinking I could end up in a 30-minute conversation about nothing, so I went straight upstairs. When I got up to the second floor, I noticed that all my roommates' doors were closed, which always meant that they were in their rooms for the night, or asleep. I got a weird feeling. Just something that made it click. They were all asleep, right? I text our house group chat, asking if anyone was in the kitchen. I felt stupid for even asking. 2 responded no, and said the other 2 had been asleep. I knew it wasn't any of my roommates down there at that moment. I dialed 911, but didn't press call. I crept into my roommate's room, access hall. Thankfully, or maybe not thankfully, she didn't have her door locked. I whispered, telling her that someone was in the house. She gave me the widest eyes ever, and almost looked like she was about to cry. She didn't suspect anything like I had, but for reference, we live in a very bad area, as there was a shooting in the house 2 doors down, only weeks earlier, by an intruder. She mouthed to make a call. The whole time we were dead silent. We didn't really hear anything at all. I was starting to think I was seeing things after such a long day, and regretted that I dialed, thinking I was going to look like an idiot when they showed up, and I was just overtired and dreaming. We explained to the operator what was going on, and they said that they would send someone as soon as possible. That actually doesn't mean right away, since it's a big and dangerous city. The police showed up, and I didn't even want to go downstairs, but the operator confirmed that it was them, so I did. But the whole time, I could swear that the operator could hear my heart beating. The police came in and looked around. I'm thinking, oh God, I look so dumb. They asked if there was any other floors. We tell them technically the basement, but it's padlocked, so really no. They checked the basement, just in case. And yeah, they were right. The man had been living in the padlocked basement. The lock was pulled off its hinges, and just kind of propped against the wall. We never looked back there, and rarely went out back. The guy had taken a comforter of one of my roommates out of the hall, had a mattress from God knows where, and his clothes. Well, he was the one moving and eating all of our stuff. He would come out in the middle of the night and do it. He started getting more comfortable. I don't know if he was drugged out, or forgot to clean his tracks, or if he didn't really care. My roommates and I have pretty consistent schedules during the week, probably letting him think that any time after 12 was good to come out. We never slept with our individual doors locked, and that freaks me out the most. He had access to any one of us at any moment, and we had no idea. When he was getting arrested, I was the only one to go down and look. I don't really know why, and I wish I didn't. I took a picture in the process of him being arrested to show my roommates who were too afraid to go down, and this is him. So yeah, let's never actually meet, dude. Last night, a friend of mine and I were walking home in my city. We were cutting from one of the main roads to another main road, but we were using the neighborhood between those 2 roads as a cut through. We rounded a super sharp corner and slammed on the brakes because a dude was literally just standing there. He comes running to the car, and it literally looked like a scene from a horror movie. He had blood on his t-shirt, and his jaw was hanging. I don't even know if he asked, but the next thing I remember, he's in the back seat while we're hauling ass to the hospital, which just happens to be right next to my friend's apartment complex. On the way, he tried his best to explain what happened, but all I was able to make out was that he abandoned his car somewhere and that he had been shot in the face. We took him to the hospital, but we weren't able to go in or anything because of COVID-19, so I'm unsure of his current condition. This might not be a super creepy encounter, but it was insane, and I would never think that anything like that would happen. My adrenaline is still pumping 12 hours later. Update. Turns out that he had been buying weed from someone and got shot in the face by the person that also tried to rob him. Don't know if he got charged or if anyone else did, but he was a victim and was pretty chill for some dude who just got shot in the face. About 2 years ago, I used to work part-time at a popular pizza chain as a delivery driver. I had a full-time job during the day, so the shift at the pizza place would be from 6 p.m. to 12 p.m. I enjoyed the job for the fact that I made good money and it was easy, but I hated working at night because it was dangerous. One night we got a call 30 minutes before closing, and it was for delivery in the worst part of town. I was stuck taking the order, since the manager had sent the other drivers home early because it was a slow night. I hurriedly headed out to deliver the pizza. About 20 minutes later, my GPS said that I had arrived. I couldn't read the house numbers because it was pitch dark and none of the houses had the porch light on. As safety, I called the customer to ask if they could turn on their light. He didn't answer until the 6th ring. He tells me that his house has 2 trash bins next to the curb and that the light was broken so he couldn't turn it on. I started walking through the front yard to the front door when I see a man staring at me through the window. I yelled out hello to him, but no reaction. He doesn't even move or open the door. I'm getting goosebumps now, and I decide to turn around to go back to my car. I call the customer again to come get his pizza from my car. He tells me in a slow, creepy voice to ignore his roommate. He said that the door is unlocked and if I could bring the pizza down to the basement because he rents the bottom floor. As I'm on the phone, I can make a small light out from the window. The man that was staring at me earlier was on the phone talking to me. I hung up and took off. By the time I got back to the restaurant, phones were turned over. Any complaints would have to wait till the next day. I'm not delivering to any basements, and I'm now taking your pizza home for dinner. Okay, so this just happened this morning, and my housemates and I are still pretty freaked out, so I thought I would share. This morning at 5 a.m., I was woken up when my roommate called out my name and told me quietly, "Oh my god, there's someone at the window." It was pitch black, so I assumed that she was seeing a weird shadow or something. But when I turned to face the window, I could see a clear outline of a male figure through the blinds, which we keep slanted open so the sunlight wakes us up in the morning. He was standing maybe a foot away from the window and was directly facing us. For some context, our room is on the ground floor and has one of those large windows that has Bundy bars. They call them this because Ted Bundy, who killed 2 women at an FSU sorority house after climbing through the window, and therefore have bars on the ground floor for bedroom windows in our sorority house. Our room was also on the side of the house, so it's not like someone could have just wandered there. To get to our bedroom window, you have to go around the walled-off patio and a thicket of vines and foliage, so you'd have to put some work into getting back there, which makes you think whatever this guy was doing was very deliberate and planned. I froze. I didn't know what to do. It was too dark to take a picture or make out any details that could identify the person, so I just kind of sat on my bed trying to process what was going on. It seemed like he was looking through the window into our room, but after a few seconds of watching him, my roommate noticed that he was holding a flashlight. To me, it looked like he was looking at the Bundy bars and where they met the wall to see how secure they were. The bars could be opened from the inside. Coincidentally, we just replaced them last semester, which is even scarier. After a few minutes, the guy went away. We told our house mom immediately and she called the police. Our house has security cameras at every entrance, and apparently it caught footage of him pacing back and forth. So he was there for a while. I'm still pretty shaken up, especially when I think about what his intentions were, and the times that this may have happened while we were still sleeping and had no idea. I'm worried that he'll return, especially since we're a sorority house that's a home to 24 young women. I just got back from a nighttime dog walk, and I'm a little sketched out. Me and my partner just recently got an 8-month-old border collie pup. We lived in a really safe, pretty small European city in a nice, quiet suburb area. I have not lived here long, and I'm not from this country, but the most disturbing events I've witnessed in this area are a few 16-year-olds having a party on a Friday night. From what I've been told, crime rates are very, very low here. There's a gravel trail that runs between a bunch of backyards, which is lined by trees, and it's completely dark at night. My partner and I have walked down this path at night a couple of times, and we've only ever saw one other person, another dog walker, with a bright head torch. There are a couple of small trails that cut across the gravel paths, one which leads up a small hill to our street. Tonight I was out walking my dog on my own. I had a glass of wine with dinner, and I guess I was feeling pretty ballsy. I decided to walk down one of the small trails, which cuts across the gravel path. It was about 8:30 p.m., although by this point, it was pretty pitch black. Despite feeling fairly confident about my choices, I was wondering if it was really such a good idea to cut across the dark paths for the sake of saving 5 minutes. I definitely wouldn't risk it in my home city. I decided to keep going, in hopes that my dog would attack the shit out of any creepy weirdos hiding in the darkness. As we walk down the trail, I see something glinting in the ditch to the left. As we get closer, it appears to be a silver metallic gym ball. I thought about how out of place this looked. No one ever dumps rubbish here, but I shrug it off and keep walking. All of a sudden, my pup lays down on her belly and refuses to move while staring straight ahead at the main gravel trail. If you've ever spent time with a border collie, you'll know the crouch I'm talking about. Now, my pup has recently taken to doing this whenever she sees either a person or an animal up ahead. We've been trying to stop her from lunging at passers and other dogs by getting her to lay down and wait until they've passed. She has taken to do this automatically without us commanding her. When it's a dog, she'll generally lay on her belly and try to commando roll towards them because she wants to say hello. When it's a person, she usually just lays there and waits. For a second, I think she's having to lay down in the grass. Then I realize that she won't move even when I give her a tug on the leash. She's just staring straight ahead, like she does when she sees someone in the distance. I stop for a while and try to scan the path ahead. It's too dark to make out anything. We sometimes get deer wandering around here, but their eyes usually glint in the dark. I don't see anything or hear anything at all, just blackness and silence. I started to get a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something told me to turn around and get the heck out of there as fast as I could. My dog quickly followed me, all the while looking back at whatever or whoever she was staring at. Usually she stops every few seconds to sniff something, but this time she hot-tailed it out of there. Was it just the wind? An animal? A creepy weirdo? I'm not 100% sure, but I can't help the feeling that my dog just saved me from a potentially sketchy situation. What do you think? When I was 10, my 2 older brothers and I drove home from a family friend's birthday party at night. Our parents were still at the party. My oldest brother, Michael, who was 17, dropped me and my other brother, Eric, 15, off to go inside so we didn't have to wait for him to park the car. As soon as Eric and I got inside our pitch black house, I heard a man grunt. We both went quiet. I was confused at how our dad got home before us since we had left him at the party. So I shouted out, "Dad?" Eric immediately looked down at me with the most terrified face I had ever seen and says, "You heard that too?" Eric played football and was relatively buff and a tougher guy, especially to my tiny 10-year-old self. I naturally relied on both of my older brothers to protect me, so seeing him absolutely frightened freaked me out big time. If he's scared, then it must be bad. We stared at each other for a moment before screaming and running out of the house without another word. We ran back outside and got into the car, where Michael still was, and told him what happened. "I'm sure it was nothing," he says. "Probably just something falling." He didn't really believe us. It definitely sounded like a voice to me and Eric. We lived in a very calm suburb, and all the neighbors were old. The road was not a main road, and the only other people that needed to drive through the neighborhood were residents. It definitely wasn't a road people who didn't live here drove through. Just as Michael tried to calm us down, a random car pulled up beside us, motioning us to roll down our windows. It was a man driving with 2 women who asked us where a well-known highway was. They had a thick, strange accent that sounded fake. Michael explained to them how to get to the highway. The strangers were completely confused and didn't seem to understand and kept asking for clarification. After they finally drove off, Michael said, "Well, that was weird. It's really hard to miss the highway, especially where they were coming from. Who doesn't know that highway anyway?" Now, all 3 of us began to panic. We realized that they were a distraction to stall us, to allow whoever was in the house to get out. The directions were simple. It should not have taken 5 minutes for them to understand. Also, this wasn't a place for people to get lost in. Of course, we called our parents, but they dismissed us. People get lost all the time, and we were just hearing things. They said that they'll be home from the party in a couple hours. So after a while, the three of us decided to go inside. My brothers grabbed their baseball bats, and I used the folded up mic stand. We slowly walked around the house, looking everywhere, under beds, in closets, and checking all of the doors. Nothing seemed to be out of place, and all the doors were locked, though I'm not sure if we checked the windows. Eventually we calmed down. When our parents got home, they thought we were just being dramatic. There's no way someone was in our house, and at least we're all safe now. So we just went to bed, and never spoke about it again. Okay, so this just happened. It's 12 a.m. Out in our backyard, we saw a few flashlights looking around our ponds. It was still for a while. Then they started moving towards our house. I went to message my sister about this, and when I looked up, the lights were gone. I don't think it could have been a normal person looking for their dog or something. They would have no reason to shut off their lights as soon as they got close to our house. My dad went out with a flashlight, and I hope he scared them off. In the morning, we were going to try to see if we saw any footprints, but since it rained heavily today, the ground is very muddy. Update. Sorry for the delay. I've had my family coming up and was busy with them, but we checked around the backyard and the ponds, and we found nothing. Not a single footprint, which is weird because I swear that's where the lights were, and it was somewhat muddy. We're pretty confused, but the following night we had no problems. Didn't see the light again. I guess whoever it was got scared off by my dad. Finding no footprints is disconcerting though, but I don't know. I'll post an update if we see any activity like this again. Update, later that night. I just saw the lights again. This time it was 10:30. It was a little fainter this time, but it was more erratic. After looking at it for a few minutes, it went out. At this point, I'm not really sure what to believe it is. It disappeared as soon as I was getting my phone out to video it. I'll try to be faster next time. Okay, first let me say that I debated on posting this here, because I may be overreacting about a few weird things that have happened in the last couple of weeks here in my house. But then I decided to go ahead and post it anyways, and see what you all think about it. And please tell me if I'm overreacting. I won't be offended if anyone tells me that I'm being silly. First off, our house has a basement/crawl space that is only accessible from the outside through a door directly underneath the bedroom window and about 10 feet from the steps leading up to the back deck. It's a fairly large space, dirt floors and concrete walls, clean and plenty big enough for a grown man to stand up in. Until recently, it was half full of junk, most from our kitchen reno, like paint cans and equipment and extra floor tiles and such, and had a padlock on it. We asked our yard guy to do some extra work that included cleaning it completely out, and when it was finally empty, we didn't bother putting the lock back on it. It had a sliding bolt that kept it closed, in addition with a little loop thingy that you put the padlock on, so we just slid the bolt and called it good. There was absolutely nothing in it, so there wasn't really a point of locking it. A couple weeks ago, my boyfriend was out on the back deck, emptying the recycling bin when he noticed the door was open. Someone would have had to open it. The sliding bolt was a bit rusty and wouldn't easily come open, and certainly wouldn't have opened on its own. We went to go check it out. Nobody there, still completely empty. He thinks, well, okay, someone was poking around and he didn't find anything interesting, but he did tell me about it and reminded me to keep the doors locked when he wasn't home. A few days after that, I had the dog outside and he ran straight to the door. He started sniffing and scratching at it, and I noticed that it was slightly open again. I opened it, went inside and walked around. Nobody was there. Let me add that we have a lot of trees and wildlife on our property, including raccoons and groundhogs, in addition of tons of squirrels. We had one huge oak tree that overhangs the roof, covering the massive bedroom, so it's nothing unusual to hear squirrels and other animals on the roof. with their little pattering feet and scratching sounds. Yesterday I was home alone, laying in bed, reading a book. The house was completely silent. Usually the dog would lay on the bed with me, but he was acting fidgety. He was pacing and just acting weird. I was hearing the usual late afternoon squirrels, or whatever was on the roof. But then I heard a noise that is clearly the crawlspace door creaking open. It's directly underneath the window to my right. So I stand up and creep over to the window. I crack the shades a teeny bit and peek out. I see a guy starting up the steps to my deck, just having exited the crawl space. I immediately said fuck no, dropped the shades, and headed up the hall directly to the door he was heading to confront him. At the same moment my dog was nuts, barking and beating me to the door, but he was nowhere in sight when I got there. I only saw him through the window for a second, and I only saw him from the back as he was heading up the steps. He was wearing a ball cap, so I couldn't even have said what color his hair was. I'm guessing my dog scared him away, but what the fuck was he doing on my porch in the broad daylight, with someone obviously home? If he hadn't planned on knocking on the door, and no one would knock on that door anyway. People come to the front and knock, not walk all the way around the back, in the trees in the backyard. I waited a few minutes, then got my pepper spray out of my purse and went to investigate. Sure enough, the crawlspace door was open again. No one was inside. When my boyfriend got home, he put a padlock on it. Then he got my gun out of the safe, where it's been for years, and assisted me keeping it under the mattress, on my side of the bed. I agreed to that after he loaded it with a rat shot, because I don't think I could shoot a human being, not even in self-defense. And a rat shot won't do much more than scare someone away with the noise from the gunshot. He was highly pissed at me that I went by myself to check out the basement, but I'm more angry than frightened. I don't know if I'm overreacting, that just because someone had been inside the basement a few times, I automatically assumed it was the man I saw who was responsible and meant harm. I'm fairly certain he did come out of there though, because I definitely heard the door open just seconds before I saw him on the steps. With it locked up now though, if someone had been routinely in and out, that will stop. Like I said, I don't know if I'm freaking out over nothing. I'm keeping my doors locked just in case. I think it's happening. Like, not right now, but I think the creep might be hanging around. It's little things, but it makes me sound crazy. I've ignored them a lot when I first moved in here, thinking that it was just because I'd been through a lot and I was living alone and pregnant, then with a baby. The nights I became sure was when I heard someone trying to get in the back gate. I called the police and they were literally there in 2 minutes. Whoever it was must have heard them because I heard them run off. I was so impressed with the police response and I felt good about that, but anyway. I was awake using my phone one night. Being it was the summer, noisy heater wasn't running and I didn't need a fan at that point. I could hear what sounded like someone was there, but like they approached the side of the house and walked away because I wasn't in that particular room. I went into the lounge room, which is made of like 75% creaky floorboards, and I felt like someone was there. And I tried to make it sound like I walked away to bed, and I crawled really silent like a cat, avoiding the creaky floorboards. I got to the window, which is covered by a curtain that's like a pull down, and I hadn't pulled it down fully. I approached it and looked out and saw a flash. I live on a pretty dark street, and the street lights a few doors down couldn't have emitted that at me, for lack of better words. I didn't call the police because I was a little inebriated and I was in absolute shock. But the thing is, there's been other things. I am sure I've heard someone tampering with my windows. I realized that when I sat up late with all the lights on, walking around, even though I listened out, nothing. But when I'm sitting around with my iPhone and laptop, no lights. It's not all the time, but occasionally I hear someone walking near the side of my house, and I'm pretty sure someone has tried to open the gate. The sound is unmistakable. I even purposely waited for the opportunities to compare the audible differences between footsteps on the pavement, out the front, at least 10 to 15 meters away, and when there was a closer noise. I'd listen to the way the activity sounded at the side of the property whenever tradespeople came. It used to be a transitional house, meaning a lot of people with problems lived there, before me, including drugs and violence. A handful of people have knocked on my door looking for previous tenants up until about 12 months after I moved in. Apparently, one guy used to deal from the shed in the backyard. Maybe someone got out after being locked up for a while and thought maybe he was still there. One of the last tenant's exes tried to kill her and the kids in the house. It has a colorful history. I have no doubts that someone's hanging around, whether it's lost druggies, a weirdo, robber. While it's not in the worst area I've ever lived, fairly tame, it's still not the best street because of some of the other housing commissions. I've also got a feeling that I might know who it is, but until I get footage, I'm not going to say. I've noticed every now and again strangest behaviors and started thinking about things I've heard, seen. I don't know. It wouldn't be too far-fetched. And if I die, I don't think it's my kid's dad. I checked that already, by means he couldn't fabricate. I think about the things that I see. The late nights, the sounds of the gate, the smoke. Anyways, the plan is to get some surveillance, because writing this shit down ain't helpful. I've already got our room set up, so no one can get in. I'm gonna put something small inside that can just record the nights, so it's hard to see, and hopefully put an end to this. I've gotten to the point where I'm actually scared, but also scared to do the surveillance thing. And that's probably the main reason I haven't done anything about cameras. I'm scared to know what's behind the window. Thing is, I think I'm just typing because when I put my phone down, I'm gonna go to sleep. And I don't know, the world is a damn scary place for a lone woman and little boy. My first post on Let's Not Me, and this happened over a year ago. Our oldest son Caden was 3 at the time, and our youngest son Connor was about 5 months old. Still gives me the chills, and still makes me uncomfortable even walking by it. It was a January evening in Pennsylvania. It was dark outside with a couple inches of snow on the ground. We had just finished eating dinner, and I planned on giving our little one a bath. My husband drives a truck for work, so he isn't home often. It's me and my boys during the week. Caden was playing in the toy room that has a door leading to the side deck. A little detail, we have no light sensor on that porch light on the whole side of our house. At this time, we didn't use that deck at all, and only really used it to grill during the summer months. It's not close to the sidewalk or the next street over. Anyway, Caden was playing in the toy room, waiting for his turn to take a bath, while I brought Connor into the bathroom. We were just about done with his bath when I heard Caden's little feet running towards the bathroom. He stands in the doorway and says, "Mommy, there's a man looking in the side door. I think it's a mailman." My heart skipped a beat because 1. No mailman is coming at 7 p.m. 2. The side door, as he called it, was never used, especially not in the winter. 3. I didn't hear anyone knock. I began to sketch myself out more by thinking how there is no light on the deck, and this person would have to walk through the yard in the snow, walk back the upstairs of the deck, and go to the door when the front porch light was on and adjacent to the shoveled sidewalk. I took Connor out of the bath, put him in a towel in his little chair, and told Caden to sit with his brother and not to come out until I said it was okay. He was very confused but listened, just kept asking me what was wrong. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find, had 911 ready to call, and got my mama bear face on. When I walked to the sliding glass door, I shined a flashlight on my phone through the window of the door, at a distance while walking up to it, hopefully to scare anyone away. The worst thought with this as a mother is when I reached the handle I realized it was unlocked. Someone could have walked right in. I flung the door open and shined my light, held up the knife and yelled, "Hey!" in the most threatening voice a 5'4", 120-pound woman could make. There were footprints in the snow up to the deck stairs and back down going into the field in the woods behind our house. I slammed the door, thoroughly freaked out, and locked it. I called the police and waited for them in the bathroom with my boys. While I was in there, I asked Caden, "Do we know who the man was?" He said, "No, but he smiled and waved at me for a long time. Freaking haunts me still." I asked him what he was wearing. He told me that he had a hat that looked like a mailman's, and he wasn't wearing a coat. That's all I got out of him. The police officers came and searched my property with flashlights before coming inside. He asked me uncating questions and then informed me that he not only saw footprints leading up the side of the deck, but to the outside door of our basement and kitchen window on the other side of the house as well. He suggested that we have someone come stay with us for the night, and they will continue to follow the footprints that were left in the snow back to the field and wood line. My father-in-law slept on the couch that night with his gun, being the closest relative to our house. My mother was a nervous wreck, and I got very little sleep that night, and never heard back from the police. Caden still mentions it from time to time randomly, and we got blackout curtains for that door. I still very much like to get better locks, just to be safe. My husband and my father think it might have been a man who saw me home alone while passing and wanted to hopefully sneak a peek. But why just stand there and watch my child and go around the whole back of the house, not by the front door or street? Hope to never see this creep's face, and I hope he never smiles or waves at my child again. I posted this as a reply to another Creepy Encounters post, but figured I would also post it as a standalone because there were some really interested responses to that one. I had an experience maybe a decade ago that had me shook for years. I was on my way to work and stopped to get gas. I worked at night and it was maybe 9 or 10 p.m. I walked into the gas station convenience store, and as I walked past the man, I had the most horrific sense of dread. As soon as I felt the fear-induced adrenaline rush began, he had turned and looked at me, and I swear, it was like time slowed down. He only looked straight at my face for a moment, never stopped turning his head, but I was so terrified that I turned and left immediately. I was so scared that I raced off and told everyone at work about this dude. When I try to think back on what it was about him that terrified me, I have no idea. I didn't recognize him. He was a totally normal looking dude. Brown hair, brown eyes, white dude in jeans and a white t-shirt. But I was certain he was going to kill me in that instant. No idea why this happened, and I've read tons of shit online trying to figure it out. It's never happened again to me. So this happened around 2017 or 2018. I was in 8th grade and quite tall for my age. 5'9". A house was for sale in the neighborhood, and it filled pretty quickly since I lived next door to a school. Every day for a week, I saw someone stand in front of the house, and I assumed it was just the new neighbor. But one day I got off the bus and started walking down the street. It was winter in Canada, and they were like tents that you put on your car so it doesn't get snow on it, and obviously you can't see behind it. So when I was walking next to the one of the new neighbor, he was hidden behind it, and he just grabbed me by the arm and started trying to pull me inside. On quick reflexes, I hit him in the face with my keys, and then he let go of me. I got into my house as quickly as possible and called the police. He never got caught, and the police patrolled my neighborhood for a week after that. Also, he wasn't even the new neighbor. So let's not meet again. Okay, so this happened about 15 years ago, but to this day, I could not live on the ground floor of a building. When I was 15, I was staying home at my mom's house for the weekend. My parents are divorced, so it was just me and her. It was about 12:30 in the morning, and I was just chilling in the living room watching TV while my mom was asleep. The living room had 2 windows that faced the front yard, and it often left the curtains open, as the house sat pretty far back on the road. My mom's house was not in the best part of the town, but I always felt relatively safe there. While I was watching TV in my pajamas, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye from the window that was closest to me. It was about 4 feet away. I turned and looked out the window. There, a man's face staring right back at me, smiling, with the most hideous grin I had ever seen. I was frozen, and for about 20 seconds, just sitting there with my eyes locked on his. Suddenly, my panic set in, and I leaped off the sofa and tried to run to my mom. I slammed my leg right above my knee into the wooden coffee table and fell on the ground. My leg felt like jelly. I scrambled up and shouted for my mom. My mom came running in, half asleep, wondering what was wrong. I started stammering that someone was at the window watching me. Just as my mom started to realize what I was saying, we both heard someone attempting to open the front door. Me and my mom both stood still, thanking God that the door was double locked. But then when it stopped, my mother looked horribly grave and just whispered, "The back door." She turned and bolted through the house, scrambling to turn the deadbolt on the back door in the kitchen, and then backed away. She ran to her room and pulled a baseball bat from beneath her bed that I always knew she kept because she was a woman living alone. Frantically, she asked me to call the police, which I did. I was whispering to the operator that someone was trying to get into my house. We then saw a shadow approaching the back door quickly and trying desperately to open the door, kicking and grunting while they tried to get in. My mother shouted, "I have a bat and I'll fucking kill you if you try to get into this house. We've called the police and they're on their way." The person on the other side stopped and was still for about 30 seconds before turning and running away. My mom and I stood in the middle of the kitchen for the 20 minutes it took the police to get to us. The whole time, my mother had the bat raised and ready to strike. When the police finally came, they looked around the house. They found that the flowers outside the window were trampled on, and there were several cigarette butts on the ground outside the window where I had initially saw the man. No one in my house smokes, and the police assumed that he had been there for a while. They didn't find him and took my description, but we never heard anything else about it. My mom moved away from that house a year later, even though we never had another incident. I now live in another country with my husband, who wonders why I have no desire to own a house and love living in high-rise apartments. I also pay for state-of-the-art security and have a baseball bat in my closet, just like my mom. I have no idea what would have happened if my mother hadn't realized the back door was unlocked and hadn't beaten the man to it, or for some reason my mother wasn't there that night, as she often worked late. I don't know if the man thought he could overpower the two women alone, or if he was just trying to scare us. Whatever that man had intended, I pray he didn't find someone else who forgot to lock the back door. Allow me to set the stage for this. I was 19 at the time this took place. I was a Marine, and I was on my first deployment to Afghanistan. Not too far from my platoon's patrol base was a structure that looked like a castle. Though interpreted conversations with locals, we were able to determine that we believed it was built for Alexander the Great. Whether that's true or not, I'll never know, but let me tell you, this place looked ancient. So being in the Marines, we did the only thing we thought was prudent at the time. We went on a patrol with the intelligence of setting up an OP inside the structure. We took the Afghan border police with us. When we got close to the structure and our Afghans figured out what we were up to, they refused to go any further. Before they left, they kept on repeating the same word over and over. Don't ask me what it was. It was over a decade ago, and there's no way I can remember it. But what I do know now was that they were trying to warn us of evil spirits. We went in anyway, without our Afghans, with the intent of staying there overnight. This place was basically an ancient fort with mud and clay brick walls on all four sides, with a building in the middle. So we set up security, made sure we had comm checks with our patrol base, and they had an updated position report on us so they knew where we were in case we got into trouble. Darkness fell. Not too long after, I went to take my turn on the wall with my friend to watch out for anyone that might be trying to sneak up on us and any other Taliban-related shenanigans. Not even 20 minutes into our shift, weird shit started going down. The entire time I was at the wall, I felt watched from all sides. I turned to see a figure walking along the wall, not far from where I was sitting. I saw it walking, but it was a robed figure that looked like it was almost floating. I turned to my friend to see if he saw it too, and he said he did, but when he got his night vision back on, the figure was gone. We didn't see anything else for the rest of our shift. We were uneasy and finished and went to rest, where I finally ended up dozing off at some point. I don't know what happened next, but I awoke to a completely black figure literally squatting on my chest. When I went to yell for help, nothing came out, and it felt like I had a hand over my mouth. I reached for my knife and felt like something was pinning my arm to the ground. I tried to squirm free, but couldn't move, so I bit down as hard as I could on what felt like a hand on my mouth. At this point, whatever weight was on me instantly disappeared and I could move and talk again. I was freaking out, and my brothers who were around saw me. My training kicked in, and I was trying my best to keep quiet and not pass out because I was hyperventilating. My squad mates calmed me down, and after telling them what happened, they all admitted to having creeps and feeling being watched the whole time they were there. None of us could sleep, and we all basically sat back to back for the rest of the night when we weren't on watch. We were pretty freaked out, so every noise or rustle of the wind made it even worse in the total silence of an ancient fort in that ancient desert. If you haven't experienced the silence of an open desert in a part of the world that there's absolutely zero light and zero noise pollution, then I suppose it would be hard to appreciate any noise in a place in the middle of the night in total darkness when you're already alert to sounds of the enemy, and now even more alert from something you can't understand. It's just about the scariest thing that anyone could ever experience. I will never experience that kind of fear again in my life, ever. To finish quickly, as soon as the sun came up, we left. Everyone was scared shitless, and none of us spoke about it again to each other. We never went back to that area again, and I still suffer from nightmares and sleep paralysis because of my personal experience that night. The scariest part of this whole thing is, I know it's probably just in my head. That's my, I guess, ghost story. If you stuck it out, thank you. I hope you enjoyed. First, we will need context. My old house was pretty pumped up on security. We had a finger ID, passcodes on the door, cameras everywhere, an automatic security system that would call the police or play a fake, the cops have been called, message. This story happened a few years back. My dad noticed a weird looking man, pretty covered up, lurking on the street just outside of our house. We thought nothing of it since sometimes you get an occasional drunk or high person wandering around your neighborhood. But this man started to inch up closer to our home, first being on the opposite side of the street, then before we knew it, being basically on our property. We just sort of watched him to see what he would do. I'm pretty sure we got bored and walked away, and just forgot. Then we started hearing strange noises coming from the downstairs, where our front door was. We decided to switch on the camera, and sure enough, this guy is banging on our door trying to get in, and then he looks through the window. He gave up, but then started to go around the side. There was a set of stairs that led into an upper area where we were. He starts to head upstairs, which sent my dad to go to the side of the house that the man was on with a knife and scream at him. The guy runs, and we don't see him again. That's the end, right? Wrong. The guy comes back later. I guess he saw the car was gone from the driveway. My dad had gone to get something, leaving me and my mom. We didn't want to confront the guy, so we had the idea of playing the fake cop alert that could be heard outside. So we played it, and as soon as the guy heard it, he ran. Never saw him again, and never want to. What makes this story creepier is on the news later, it showed a guy that had been lurking around houses and actually killed people, had just been arrested. It was the same man who was at our house. I'm going to share something that happened to me last night. So for a bit of background, I'm a 13-year-old male in the UK, and I have a Doberman that I normally take out in the back garden so she can do her business before bed. But this time was a lot different. I had opened the back door and she darted off into darkness, so nothing out of the ordinary, but when I called her back, she didn't show. I sat there for about 15 minutes waiting when I see something move in the distance. I brush it off, and that's when my dog just walks into the flat. When I walked in and shut the door, my blood ran cold as I heard the door handle jiggle. It had to be a person. It wasn't windy or anything. I flung myself against the door, and my dog started growling with her back hair standing straight up, breathing heavily. It was terrifying. I took off my slippers and held them in my hand, so I wouldn't make a noise as I walked away from the door and practically flung myself up the stairs. I must have fell asleep because later that night I woke up to the sound of faint cackles from outside, and I just laid there horrified. To whoever was on the outside of that door, let's never meet again. For a short period of my life, I lived in a car. Don't worry, my life is good now. When you live in a car, you pick up systems, ways to keep your car clean, places to shower for cheap, and most importantly, where to sleep. I'm mostly bounced from different Walmarts in the area. I live in the South, where there's tons to pick from. It's good to pick different parking lots, so you don't attract any attention for going to the same one every night. I always made a rule to sleep under the light in the parking lot. One night, the Walmart I picked didn't really have good spots in the light, so I figured I'd just sleep in whichever spot in the back and go to bed after a long day at work. As I woke up to the sun rising, I saw 2 handprints left by a stranger outside my window. This convinced me to always park under the light no matter what, and maybe avoid that specific Walmart. Honestly, I'm just happy whoever it was just looked at me and left me alone. All I had on me was pepper spray, and it wouldn't have worked out if I would have used it while I was in the car. So this happened a few months ago. I'm a sophomore in college and was traveling down to my hometown over break. I was having some relationship issues with my stepmom, so I didn't want to stay at my dad's house that night I arrived at my hometown. I phoned a friend of mine from high school to see if I could stay at his place. I knew from social media that he was still in town, and I've stayed at his place before, so I knew that there would be a place for me to stay. My friend, let's call him Z, seemed to be a pretty normal dude. We weren't best friends or anything, but he and I got pretty close by the time we graduated. We occasionally text or hung out if I was in town, and catch up, reminisce on the times we spent in the orchestra or in English class. When I called, he seemed extremely enthusiastic. Z's a normally upbeat guy, but this time it seemed like he was getting a brand new car. I didn't think about it at the time, and he said I could sleep in the guest room, so I headed over. When I got to his house, he was just as excited as he was on the phone. He was bringing up stuff to do, like getting high, and watching weird movies or playing video games. Z's parents weren't home, so he really wanted the opportunity to smoke. I was pretty tired from the drive, but since we rarely saw each other, I thought a little bit of bonding couldn't hurt. We played Smash Bros, smoked some weed, and just chatted for a few hours. It was longer than I wanted, but I was having fun, so whatever. By the time it was getting late, around 2 a.m., he started asking me some pretty weird questions. Questions like if I ever wondered what it's like to kill someone, or if I thought anyone would miss me if I was gone. This along with some pretty normal questions, like if I've ever had a boyfriend, or how my parents are doing, or if I'm making any friends at school, and this gave me a weird feeling. I was confused in the moment, but it didn't hit me until after that Z could be assessing me for something bad. The weirdness of it all made me want to go to bed. We stopped the game and both went into the basement where his room and the guest room was located. We say goodnight, I go in my room and get ready for bed. I'm having trouble sleeping, just insomnia that I've had for a while. So I stay awake for another hour until I hear some movement from outside my room. The walls were pretty thin, so I could hear footsteps walking past my door and up the stairs to the main floor, then back down quickly after. What struck me as odd was that I didn't hear the basement door open, which creaks when it does. The light didn't turn on, so I was confused what Z was doing. I heard him go back into his room, but I had this odd feeling. Just ever since I saw him last night, he seemed a lot different than he's ever been. I decided to look him up on social media and Google to see anything out of the ordinary. Everything seemed normal until I found his Tumblr, which linked to an inactive Twitter account that I found on my Twitter contact list. His Tumblr was, well, disturbing. There were graphic drawings of mutilated bodies of humans and animals, links to suspicious looking websites, that I didn't dare click on. Text posts and stories about murdering, cannibalism, necrophilia, and torture. There were photos of guns, knives, axes, which after looking at closely, were definitely taken from his bedroom. The last post, around a week prior, which was a post from his account saying he wished he could find someone easy to kill, like a homeless person. I was immediately filled with dread. I knew he was going to do something. He must have gone upstairs to lock the door. I packed my things, luckily I packed lightly, and opened the small window at the top of the bedroom wall. I started desperately climbing through, and as I was pulling my legs through, he opened the door. It was dark, but the streetlights illuminated enough for me to see he was carrying something long and skinny, so probably a knife. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I just turned around, hopped in my car, and drove off as fast as I could to my dad's house. I immediately blocked him everywhere and reported his Tumblr account, not before telling the police. They said they couldn't do anything, as the guns are registered under his dad's name, and he hasn't actually done anything yet. Nevertheless, I told all my other high school friends not to hang out with Z. Ever since then, I've been creeped out whenever I meet new people. Just realizing that someone I knew so well could underneath be a person that wanted to hurt me so bad, who could kill me. I don't know what you're doing now, Z. I'm not sure I want to know. I hope you're getting help. Anyways, let's not meet again. I was born and brought up in Delhi, but my family originally belongs to Bihar. All these experiences started when I first went to visit my grandparents, and because I was 2 or 3 years old, I don't remember the incident at all, but my parents and other villagers have told me about it many times. My grandparents' home was a 2-story building without railing, and I was playing on the roof besides my sister and my cousin, who were reading something. It was around 6 in the evening, and the sun hadn't set fully yet. My mother went downstairs to get something, leaving me with my elder sister, who was about 14 years older than me. Somehow I fell off the roof. When my mother came back, she didn't find me, and within 2 or 3 minutes the whole village was looking for me. After a few hours, someone found me under a tree that had a lot of thorns. They found me without any clothes, or without a single scratch on my body, laying there blindly as someone had just placed me there. I also want to mention that it wouldn't be possible for anyone to take me away without being noticed by someone, since the stairs are right in the middle of the house, and there were about 20 family members present in the house. After this, I was taken to a priest who said that someone or something is linked with me. When I visited my grandparents at the age of 13, I used to roam around the fields. While going home one late evening, I saw a beautiful girl, must have been about the same age, appearing out of nowhere. We talked for a bit and became friends. At the start, she would often meet me around a particular place, but after a few meetings, there was no fixed time or place, and she would appear out of thin air, especially when I was in a bad mood. I also want to mention that these meetings took place over a long period of time, as I used to visit my grandparents every year, but would only stay there about a week or so. As time passed, I kind of became addicted to her. I knew there was something odd about her, because whenever I used to ask her about her parents, or where she lives, or any personal questions, she would totally avoid the questions. Also, she used to wear the same white dress every time. When I asked her about it, she smiled and answered, saying that I used to like the dress very much, but I know very well that I never complimented her on her dress. When my grandfather died, we stopped to visit in the village, as my grandmother came to live with us. I didn't see her for a month, since I didn't have my usual trip to my grandparents, but I saw her here, in Delhi. At first I was very happy, and also shocked to see her. I must have been 18 at the time. When I came back home, I talked about her with my mom. My grandmother overheard us and was furious at first, because it wasn't allowed in the village for a boy and a girl to spend time alone in the late evenings. When I described how she looks, my grandma said that no one looks like that in the village. The village isn't a big one, and my grandmother spent over 60 years in that village. and she was very confident that the girl that I'm describing must have been from another village. But the nearest village to my village is about 5 kilometers, and it wouldn't have been possible or allowed for a girl to transfer that much distance all by herself in late evening. My grandmother and my mother were slightly worried, but they didn't say anything else. But they told me to invite the girl to the house the next day. The next day, when I met her, I asked her to come to my house. She answered in a very strange way, her voice still fresh in my head. She said with a smile, "Do you really want me to come with you to your house?" I was a bit startled by how she said it, and I muttered, "Not right now, but tomorrow." She agreed and left. I returned home and told my mother about it. The next day, I asked my mother to make something nice for my friend, and she smiled. I waited for her to come, but the time passed, and yet there's no sign of her. My mom said that she was going to pick up some clothes from the roof, and will come back quickly. Seconds later, she left, and the girl arrived. I asked her to come in and shouted for my mom and grandmother, who were upstairs. I asked her to wait as I ran towards the kitchen for cookies that my mom had made for us. After some time, she said that it was getting late and she had to leave, but I asked her to wait so that she could meet with my family. After about 10 minutes or so, she said it would soon be dark, and hence she would have to be going, and that she'll have to meet my mom some other time, and then left. I was furious with my mother, as she said that she would be back soon, and my friend waited over a half an hour just to meet her. As I was going to make my way towards the stairs, I saw her coming down. I yelled at her, asking her where she was and why she didn't come down when I called her. Looking confused, she said she didn't hear anything, and why did the girl leave so early? When I told her that we were waiting for her for half an hour, she surprisingly answered and said she was only gone for 5 to 10 minutes, at most. I thought she was making excuses and ran to my room. This was the first time my mother started to believe that something was wrong. After this, every time the girl used to meet me, other people would never be present due to various reasons. My mother was worried and decided to place a camera in my room, where most of the meetings used to take place. But surprisingly, the camera didn't catch anything. My parents thought that I might have some psychological problems, and consulted with a psychiatrist. Various tests were done, but the results came back normal. My grandmother, who was a very spiritual woman, asked my parents to take me back to the same priest who examined me in my childhood. This priest performed rituals and gave me a sort of a pendant-like thing and asked me never to remove it from my neck. As soon as I came back to Delhi, I felt sick. I was admitted to the hospital, but none of the doctors could determine the reason for my high fever. For 3 months, I was suffering from an unknown disease until one day my nephew, who was around 6 years at the time, came to visit me along with my parents. My brother-in-law said that the nephew was asking to see me, hence why he had to bring him. My brother-in-law and my mother went outside for some time. Meanwhile, my nephew came near me and snatched away the pendant and threw it out the window. I didn't understand why he did this, but before I could react, I saw her standing right behind him. After 3 months, still in that white dress, and I passed out. After some time, I woke up and found the doctors examining me. As the doctor left, my mother, nephew, and brother-in-law came into the room. My nephew was crying. He must have been scolded by his father for what he did. They were asking him why he threw the pendant away. Surprisingly, he said that an older girl than himself asked him to do it. We were all shocked. But surprisingly, I wasn't sick anymore, and I was feeling normal within a week. I was discharged from the hospital. This incident freaked me out to an extent, but still whenever she used to meet me, I couldn't resist her. These meetings increased significantly when I went to Kota for studies with my cousin. Also, after my return from the hospital, my family members too started to see her and feel her. Mainly my mother, often feeling that someone had just entered into my room, but finding no one. Also, bad things started to happen to people that were mean to me, as a boy made fun of me for my glasses and said someone pushed him down the stairs the same day. Time passed, and one day my father called me, saying that he was coming to meet me, and that he also got a new pendant from the priest for me. That night, she said she wouldn't leave me this time, and no one could interfere. The next day I came back from classes. I had many missed calls from my mother. When I called her, I was shocked that my father had an accident while coming back from the railway station. Suddenly I remembered what she had said the previous night, and I gasped in sheer fear. That night, when she came to meet me, I was frightened a bit, but I told her that I didn't want to meet her anymore, and that she should leave. I can't remember anything after that. After that night, I never saw her again, and to this day, I've only seen her in a dream. The same dream every time, where we are sitting on a bench in front of a huge tree. She is wearing the same dress, and that's all I can remember from the dream. This happens every full moon, and whenever I'm feeling very sad, but I never saw her in person again. Also, I would like to mention that I've been in 2 major accidents, but escaped both times without injury. So this happened about 5 years ago, while I was 9 months pregnant. I was Christmas shopping at the mall with my then 7 and 15-year-old daughters one Saturday night in a very safe city with very low crime rate. There was an Applebee's connected to the mall, and we ended our shopping pretty late, and the mall stores were starting to close. I took my kids to the connected Applebee's for a late dinner. We finished up eating about 10 p.m. and leave out the Applebee's entrance into the practically deserted parking lot with shopping bags in tow. As we got to the car, I was in the middle of maneuvering the shopping bags on my arms to find my keys when a 50-ish-year-old crusty-looking guy starts walking up from somewhere in the parking lot with shaggy gray hair and a faded flannel shirt and old jeans. I noticed him briskly approaching when he was about 40 feet away, and he said, "This is a stick-up. Give me all your money." My blood ran cold, and I stared at him and shakily said, "What?" He then said he was just kidding and came and stood right next to my daughters, who were standing on the other side of the car waiting for me to unlock the car to let them in. He starts to make small talk with me and my girls. He's asking things like if we were being good for Santa, how old they were, if we got all our Christmas shopping done, what kind of things did we get. He didn't seem drunk, high, slow, or mentally challenged at all. He was very coherent and seemed sound of mind. Mind you, I was a heavily pregnant woman, alone with my 2 daughters in a mostly deserted parking lot at 10 o'clock at night, who was being approached by a stranger who came and stood right next to my kids, on the other side of the car just shooting the breeze, talking to me and my kids, with his hands in his pockets and occasionally looking over his shoulder. I didn't want to aggravate him, so I was politely conversing with him and trying to look calm and nonchalant while trying to disguise my frantic hands digging inside my giant purse for my car keys. This exchange went on for a couple of minutes while he periodically kept looking over his shoulder. I was slightly panicking and trying to be polite to keep the situation from escalating. I felt like at any moment he could pull a knife or gun, rob me, and my kids were right next to him, away from their mother on the other side of the car, and I couldn't find my fucking car keys to get my kids into the car safely. He kept trying to engage them in conversation, and I could see my oldest daughter was a little weirded out. She kept glancing at me to gauge my assessment and reaction to the situation. Kids often tend to not recognize potential danger when they are with their parents, since they see us as their protectors. And being that he was only talking and acting friendly, I was doing my best to stay calm. They were oblivious to the alarming situation that we were all in, and being 9 months pregnant, and that I was no match for a grown man, especially if he was hiding a weapon on him. While still desperately digging for my keys, I tried politely to give him hints that the conversation was over by saying things like, "It was nice chatting with you, I gotta get these kids to bed, and it was nice meeting you. And tell my girls to say it was nice meeting him too." My polite attempts to get this guy to leave wasn't working because he kept sidestepping my attempts and asking them what their favorite subjects in school was and how nice young ladies they were. My outgoing 7-year-old was completely oblivious to how not okay the situation was because he was being friendly and because the whole time she was with her mommy, so I'm safe, child mentality. So she started to talk about what she picked out for Daddy for Christmas, talking about kid stuff and asking if he knew what Minecraft was. and keeping this creep from leaving us by keeping him engaged in conversation. They didn't realize that I was becoming desperate to get them the hell out of there. Then, I suddenly felt the seeking feeling of dread when I realized I may have lost my keys in the mall and that we were stuck outside with a strange man who kept looking over his shoulder and was showing no signs of walking away. I was thinking that he was waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. All he had to do was grab one of my girls and threaten their life, knowing that it would make me do whatever he wanted as long as he wouldn't hurt them. I started to feel my adrenaline spike, and my heart and stomach were doing flip-flops, and I felt like at any moment shit was gonna go down, as the gravity of realizing that there's no other people or witnesses around, and that we were totally alone with him at that moment. Odds were stacked against us, and that he has his chance. Then, he was all of a sudden like, "Okay, it was nice talking with ya. See ya later," and walked off in the same direction as to which he came from. It wasn't until then I found the car keys and unlocked my car. I told my kids to get in fast, and I got in too and locked the doors, started the car, and drove the hell out of there. My 15-year-old lightheartedly and jokingly said, "Okay, that was weird," and laughed. I was overwhelmed with relief, and then I was confused over what just happened. I thought to myself, why the hell would a guy of seemingly sound mind think it is totally acceptable to go out of his way and just approach a woman and her kids in a deserted parking lot late at night just to chit-chat? But being that nothing happened, I brushed it off and joked about it too. When we got home, my husband greeted us and asked how shopping went. I said it went well, and my 15-year-old told him what happened in the parking lot and how weird it was, and was kinda just joking about it. I started joking too, saying how I was mentally having a panic attack while trying to look calm, and I started making fun of myself, telling my husband how I was attempting to inconspicuously rummage through my purse to find my keys. My husband went completely white, and I acknowledged his horrified look of alarm and assured him that, albeit creepy, the guy just talked and eventually left on his own. Now, my father-in-law is a retired sheriff deputy, and my husband went through police academy training after graduating high school. He decided to go to business school instead of becoming a cop, and being that the knowledge he gained from that, plus growing up with a cop as a dad, I found out why my husband looked absolutely horrified when I told him the details. What my husband told me completely rattled me to the bone. My husband told me that he was 100% sure that the reason why the guy was hanging around us and chit-chatting was because he was waiting for me to unlock my car. And the reason why he was standing next to our kids was because once I unlocked the car and the kids started to get inside, he was most likely going to force himself into the car with my kids and hold a knife or gun to them to gain leverage on me to force me to cooperate, knowing that I wouldn't abandon my kids, which would force me to get in the car and then do whatever he wanted me to, which most likely would be to drive to a remote location to do God knows what. And being that he wasn't wearing a mask suggests that his intentions were to also leave no witnesses to identify him. I then remembered that he was positioned by the back passenger door where my 7-year-old was standing, waiting to get in. My husband then told me the most likely reason why the guy ended up leaving was because it took me so long to find my keys, and the longer it took, the more anxious and spooked it made him. The whole time I was desperate to find my car keys, which through some sort of divine intervention stayed hidden in my purse, thus saving us from potentially being abducted. Where I live, it was about 11 p.m. when this happened. I live in an apartment complex where all of the apartment entrances are outside, not in an indoor hallway. My living room couch is about 20 feet away from the front door. I was laying down on my couch doing some studying when I hear the front door knob turn. It's super squeaky. The knob jiggles a few times. I thought it was my roommate, so I yelled towards the door to hold on so I could put my German Shepherd up so she wouldn't jump all over my roommate. I put the dog in my bedroom and then I went to the front door. I looked through the peephole, no one was there. I called my roommate, who I haven't seen in a couple months, which is because she was staying with her family out of state because of the pandemic. She said she's still out of state, so it wasn't her. My sister is across the country on vacation, so it wasn't her either. I called the night management to my apartment, and they said that they'll call security to have them come out just to scope things out, but security didn't answer their phone. The past few weeks I felt like someone has been watching me. My car was broken into, and they took everything, camping and photography gear, and my violin. Yes, I was stupid for leaving it in my car. There's also a bunch of people who sit out on their balconies and do nothing but stare. So it could be anyone, seeing that I live alone because my roommate is gone. I also have an assigned parking spot, so they know which car I drive. Not as creepy as some other stories on the subreddit, but it definitely spooked me out for a few months. When I was back in high school, I arrived at school earlier than most of the students and the staff. This particular day was rainy and the school was empty. I was walking down the main hallway towards the cafeteria. No one was around when suddenly a boy I only mildly recognized came from the nearby hall. This boy always sort of gave me the creeps, so I tried walking on the opposite side of the hall from him, but he walked straight towards me, smiling. That smile, it gave me chills. I knew if I could just get past him, I would be in the cafeteria where there would be other students, and I would be in the clear. He stopped a foot in front of me, way too close for comfort, and said hello. He could have reached out and touched me, but he didn't. I said hello and tried sidestepping him. He stepped in front of me again. We did this a couple times. I would try to step in one direction and he would block my path, and he was aware that I was trying to get past him. I glanced towards the balcony, then risked looking over my shoulder. No one was in sight. His words chilled me. No one is coming to save you. My brain went into panic mode and I froze up. What did I need saving from? What was he gonna do? He stepped towards me and I couldn't move. Finally, I hear a door close behind me. Steps down the hall as an administrator was walking towards us. As quickly as it started, it was over. I walked towards the adult, towards safety, and I was free. I did report him, but nothing ever came of it. Since he didn't touch me, the report acted more as a log in case he did something similar in the future. It happened 8 years ago, during the summer. A little backstory there. I was at my mom's house, but she barely lived there anymore. She spent most of her time at her boyfriend's, and my sister was very often left alone. I was a student in another city, but I had came back to the house during the holidays. I was 19 and my sister was 16 at the time. Our house had 2 floors. The living room and the kitchen were on the first floor, then 3 bedrooms and a bathroom on the second floor. The kitchen and living room had glass window doors that opened on a large terrace. From the terrace, you could go into the backyard by some stairs. We didn't really use that ground floor, as it was pretty dark due to the small windows, and it was basically a garage and an office to do our homework. Like I said, it was summer, very hot. I had just discovered Game of Thrones, and I had 2 seasons to watch. Every morning, I took my laptop, made myself comfortable on the terrace near the kitchen, and would watch an episode, or 10. My garden was surrounded by a U-shaped building, so you could see the terrace and my garden very well from the balconies. Some men were working there for a couple days now, and they were working there late, so I could often see them while I was watching the series in the evening. They were minding their own business, and so did I, so I didn't think much of it. One morning, I was sleeping in late, and my sister woke me up whispering, "Wake up, there's a man in the house." I was half naked because of the heat of the summer. I stood up, perfectly awake now, grabbed a shirt and went downstairs, practically running. I know this is a dumb thing to do, half naked, helpless young woman, but I am very protective over my little sister, and I didn't feel any fear to this point. I went to the kitchen, couldn't find a sharp knife, so I took a fork. Absurd, I know. I asked her where she saw him. She told me she was watching TV in the living room, and because the windows were open, she saw a man in the reflection, standing just behind her. She jumped off the couch, finding herself in front of him. A tall man in his late 30s. She had no chance in a fight. The guy had one of his feet on the first step to the second floor, where I was sleeping. She shouted, Who are you? He just walked quietly back in the kitchen, where the door to the window was wide open, and took the stairs to the garden. As soon as I heard that, I ran into the backyard with my helpless weapon. I ran to the gate in the front of our garden, and went in the street looking for him. I'm sure if I found him, I would have not been so brave anymore, and would have probably peed myself. Suddenly, I realized my sister was still alone in the house, and maybe that fucker was there too. I went back to the kitchen, searched in the house, but thank God we were alone. This is when I saw my computer was missing. My sister told me that the guy didn't have anything in his hands when he left. That was the scariest part, because it meant either he was in the house for quite some time before, took the laptop and came back to do whatever the fuck he planned to do, or there was another person in there. I put some decent clothes on, took my sister to the police station nearby. I'm very angry with the policemen. She was a minor. She told them everything and described the guy with a lot of detail. They asked her, "Did you recognize him?" And she said yes, without a doubt. They said, "You know it's highly unlikely that we'll find him. You should be thankful that you and your sister hadn't been raped." Like she needed to be more frightened than she already was. They wrote up a report, and she was too shaken up, but couldn't recognize the man, even though she said the contrary multiple times. We never heard back from the police. We came back into the house. She was very scared, and I was very angry with the loss of my very expensive laptop. I needed it for school and had tons of photos on it, and I was also angry at the attitude of the police officer. We both sat down on the terrace and talked about what happened and how lucky we were that she had saw the man before he came upstairs. This is when I noticed the working men weren't working there anymore. From the streets, no one can ever know we have a backyard and another entry into the house. My sister told me that he was acting like he knew the house a bit. Maybe it was his first time and we didn't notice. I'm certain one of the men working on the neighbor's balcony, who has been watching me, was the person that broke in that morning. From that day on, we double locked our doors and slept in the same bedroom for weeks. I was 9 or 10 when this happened. My parents had just picked me up from softball practice, and I was pretty tired. Before getting home, my parents stopped at the grocery store to shop for dinner. Since I was tired, I asked to stay in the car and take a nap. They agreed and let me, since they would be fast. I quickly drifted off to sleep, laying in the back seat of our little car. At some point, I wake up, kinda groggily, but with a tinging sensation. A chill ran down my spine. At first I couldn't figure out why, because I was still half asleep and a little out of it. I sat up and just started to look around, but didn't find anything. Then I heard a tapping noise. There was no one around, but the tapping continued. In my half-awake state, I realized that the tapping sound was coming from behind me through the closed car window. I turned my head to see a creepy woman staring at me intensely. She was a methed out, high homeless lady. She was grinning at me with her yellow-brown, rotting teeth. The few she had left anyway. Her translucent, pale, yellowish skin was warped, stretched out, and burned in some places as if she passed out in the sun for too long. Her arms were very skinny and veiny, bruised and probably infected from the puncture marks running up and down both of her arms. Her skin looked a little bit green, and there was pus that was oozing out. Her nails were discolored, long, jagged, and broken. Dirty blonde hair was all over the place, badly cut and greasy. The most unnerving part though was that she was heavily pregnant, never mind that she was also barefoot, and also had white clothes on with dried vomit in the front, and obviously had pissed herself on more than one occasion. Her outfit looking back kinda reminded me of a cult-like uniform. Anyway, this woman freaked me out. Like, where did she come from? What did she want with me? And who knows how long she had been there, watching me sleep. I wish I would have done something, like honked the car horn, or started screaming. But the thing was, I was too scared. I couldn't do anything. Thank God the doors were locked, because she tried to open all the doors. I don't know what she was thinking, or planning to do, but it was certainly unnerving. She got frustrated and pounded on the windows, making animal-like grunts, signaling her frustration at being unable to get into the car. Thank God, by some miracle, she eventually gave up and just wandered off. I told my parents what happened as soon as they came back. The lady was gone at this point. My parents got upset at me about what happened and just made me go shopping with them next time. Safe to say, years after, I've never ran into this woman again, and I hope to keep it that way. It was Christmas time. My wife and I were staying at our childhood home, where her mother now lived, all alone. Well, not if you include her cats. The house was on a quiet cul-de-sac in the suburbs. If you're picturing freshly mowed yards, American flags, and empty sidewalks, you're picturing it right. It was a single-story home that was attached to a garage out front. The garage had 2 doorways, apart from the electric garage door, of course. One that leads to the garden and backyard. This one had an old doggy door from the days with dear old Max that they covered with a piece of nailed wood. That had always made me slightly uncomfortable before, but I figured it had been that way for years, so what's the worst that could happen? The second door led into the kitchen. It could stop a mouse, but not much else. Definitely not something that wanted in, or someone. We were asleep in my wife's childhood bedroom at the front of the house. It was 3 a.m. I was in that deep, dark recess of sleep. Then I heard it, the scream. "What are you doing?" It was my mother-in-law's voice echoing down the hallway. To me, lost in the sea of sleep, it sounded like a jet engine roaring past my eardrum. I bolted up. What happened next happened in a matter of seconds. But about that scream, even though I was dead asleep, I heard enough of it to sense the urgency behind it. It wasn't a, "oh, you scared me" type scream. This was different, and I knew it. I watch and read a fair amount of true crime, and this scream awakened that horrible fear, that one that says, this can't be really happening to me, can it? Honestly, in that second of the night, it sounded like someone was being murdered. You ever wonder if you're a fight or flight type of individual? I always have, and I came to know something about myself this night. I'm a fighter. I leaped out of bed, growled, in the manliest voice I could muster. "I'm gonna kill you, motherfucker." I tore the bedroom door open and ran down the hallway. There, at the end, I saw my mother-in-law, nightgown on, a look of utter shock in her face, standing still. We make eye contact as I continue towards her. She turns her head and looks directly into the kitchen. I hurry past her and round the corner, into the kitchen. The hollow core door is obliterated, shards everywhere. I look through the open frame to see the electric garage door is open. I push ahead. As I run into the garage, I hear it, the sound of someone hopping into a car, just out of view. Just as I make it to the driveway, I see the car peeling out from the sidewalk adjacent to the house. But the adrenaline is still pumping, and who am I to say no to adrenaline? So like an idiot, I run barefoot after the car. But I'm no Michael Johnson, and even he couldn't have caught that speeding car. It soon vanishes down the street, and I'm left alone. The police showed up within 3 minutes, which, I have to say, makes me feel a lot more at ease with my mother-in-law living there now. They took our statements. My mother-in-law said that she heard noises, the hollow core door leading to the house being kicked in, and she walked into the kitchen where she encountered the burglar, a small-framed woman. The police theorized she was working as part of a team. Her job was to squeeze the doggy door, kick in the hollow core, and open the electric garage door for her accomplices. According to the police, the burglars most likely thought no one was home. Fortunately, my mother-in-law must have caught her off guard and scared her, in addition to my manly growl, of course. But it feels good to know everyone was safe, and to learn that I guess I've got a little fight in me. And for the record, we bought the heaviest goddamn wooden door you've ever seen to replace the hollow core. I would like to see a mouse try to get through that. We moved into a new house right after my 10th birthday. I'm the second oldest of 7, but at the time there was only 6 of us. When we moved in, my younger brother was incredibly scared of our basement. Every night before he went to bed, he would lock the basement door and the back door that's in the kitchen, right next to each other. We were always making fun of him, like siblings do. After a couple years, I learned why. My next door neighbor ran a daycare. Our bus would stop about 4 blocks from my house, and we would walk with the daycare kids, and had to leave by 7:15. My dad had to be at work at 7 a.m., so he'd wake us up before he left. our oldest sister stayed at a friend's house, so this particular morning, my brother Buddy and I were the only ones in the house. We got around and went to the kitchen to make our lunches for school. In the middle of making our lunch, we heard a knock. We both went to the back door and were thinking some kids were trying to scare us. We looked through the door windows and no one was there. After a minute, we went back to making our lunches. A couple minutes later, we heard a knock again. At this point, we felt uneasy. We both went to the back door, and still, no one was there. This time, we decided to wait. Suddenly, we heard it again. We realized it wasn't the back door, it was the basement door. We both turned to our right, looking directly at the basement door, when it started shaking. Someone was trying to open that door, and when they couldn't, they started pounding on it very aggressively. We screamed and ran to our mother's room. We woke up my mom and she comes downstairs, angrily, for waking her up. We waited at the top of the stairs for her to check out the basement. She went down there for a few minutes and called us down. There was nothing and no one. There was no other way out. The only door was the basement door from the kitchen. Since the door was locked, we knew if it was a person, they would have been stuck down there. After that morning, we started making our lunches before going to bed and avoided the basement altogether. About a year later, my brother had a friend over and it happened again. I wasn't there to tell you that story, but now, 13 years later, it hasn't happened again. And yes, my family still lives in the house. This encounter is a little mild, but still creeped me out nonetheless. This happened to me around 11 or 12 years ago, when I was about 13 or 14. It was a weekend, and I had just finished babysitting for my aunt. My cell phone rang, and on the line was a man who sounded to be about in his mid-30s or early 40s. Right away he called me by my name. "Is this?" I said yes, and he keeps on going on and on about how he's known me for a very long time, and he's an old friend and wanted to catch up. This guy was obviously looking for someone else with the same name, so I kindly let him know that he had got the wrong number. He responded with, No, you just don't remember me. I'm telling you, we were friends and we could catch up." I was young and it wasn't my nature to just hang up on someone, so it went on for about 20 minutes. Eventually I said bye, and he promised to call back later. A few hours later he did call. My aunt answered and asked to know his name. She relayed it to me. It was not a name I recognized. She hung up and I thought it was weird, but it was over. Maybe a year or so later, the man called me back. Once again he insisted that he knew me and called me by my name and asked to catch up. This time I was surrounded by friends and confidently told him to stop calling me. I never heard from him again. It still gives me shivers when I think about it.